Of course we have music.
Oh, good.
And it's going live.
And it's going live, according to our senior video engineer.
What, the one chewing his fingernails?
That's the one.
What is all this stuff?
Way
Live?
too sophisticated.
Are we live, sir?
Hold on, just refresh the link again.
There's stuff from January.
All right. Where?
No. Just
April?
mine? Okay. Mine just hasn't refreshed.
Okay.
And we're live.
Still one of the wheels.
Oh, we're live. How about
Okay,
that?
we're live, everyone, so mind your P's and Q's.
Hello.
Alrighty. Hello, everyone watching the video. We are just about to start the 271st episode of the Airline Pilot Guide. Would somebody do something to suppress the audience over here? Yeah, the hecklers.
Sorry,
peanut gallery?
The chemtrail
the peanut
aircraft's
gallery.
a bit late.
Okay. I think we are going to go ahead.
Is Matt
and-
going to have to sit and hold that up in the air like that for the whole show?
No, only when you want to talk to the audience.
Okay.
Really?
Let's don't talk to the audience.
Well, we're not talking to you.
Okay, good. It worked. All right. Let's go ahead and start. What's that? Awesome. All right. All right, here we go. Let me make sure we're recording. I think we are. Okay, we're recording. Ba-do-ba-do-bum-bum-ba-dum-bum. Airline Pilot Guy, episode 271.
Flight 209er, you are cleared for takeoff. Roger. LA to 123.9er.
Roger. Request connected.
Hello, you're listening to the... What happened to sound? It's not going through the PA anymore.
It is.
Oh, is it? Okay, I just... Yeah, just the music stopped.
Shall we do that again?
Take two.
Fine quality, high production.
I thought it was something going on with my computer, but it wasn't.
It didn't stop here.
But it did through the PA speaker, and it did through my, as well. Yeah. Okay, let's try it again. Airline Pilot Guy, episode 271.
Flight 209er, you are cleared for takeoff.
Roger.
LA to 123.9er.
Roger.
Request connected.
Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, the view from our side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from the Courtyard by Marriott Hotel in Pittsburgh, PA. And on this episode, we're going to talk about more bad passenger behavior, and an incident involving a CRJ-2 of SkyWest livery, and more news, your feedback, and the latest Plain Tales episode, The Aviators of Pittsburgh. So get all settled in, tray tables and seatbacks in their upright and locked positions. Electronic devices powered on. Flight 271 is ready for pushback. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special episode of the Airline Pilot Guy Show. We are here in, actually I said Pittsburgh, but it's Coriopolis. Nope. Coriopolis, we got the locals here. We clarified that, and they said, you pronounce it Coriopolis. So here we are at the Courtyard right across the street from the 911th Airlift Wing. There's a big air show here this weekend, and that's why we're here. And joining me today, we have the lovely Doctor, Physiatrist to be exact. And we also have a skydiver, a mountain climber, a marathon runner, and scuba diver probably. I don't know. I didn't even ask that. but-
No, I've never
No?
done scuba diving.
Well, we'll just pretend that that's what you do.
Fair enough.
Dr. Steph.
Hello, Captain Jeff. How are you? It's so nice to be sitting here,
In person. Yeah,
we
it
don't
is.
get to do that
Although
too
we're kind
often.
of sitting at two separate
Well,
tables, but
yeah, it's a little awkward, but that's
Yeah.
okay. We like Nev in the middle.
yeah, he's kind of playing the referee here.
Yes.
Yeah, so thanks for heading up here and joining us for this wonderful event.
Yeah, of course. Wouldn't miss it. Glad to be here and looking forward to a great show with y'all today.
Awesome. And we also have from across the pond over here live with us in the Pittsburgh area, the Airbus Captain Extraordinaire, Captain Nick Anderson.
Is that the best you could do, Jeff?
I thought he was going to say
On short
Captain
notice.
Al.
You have to try a little.
Shall I go on then? Professional photographer, just an all-around great guy, Captain Nick.
Hey!
Hey, let's
much
say a
indeed.
big round of applause
Thank
from
you
the
very
live
much.
audience.
Oh, I love you all. Love you all. I'll be here all week. It's great to be it's great to be back, Jeff. I'm sure there'll be more about our various journeys to get here. But now we're here. We're amongst friends. We're drinking beer. We're having a show. This is great. Life couldn't be better.
I couldn't agree more. And also, we have to introduce our technicians here, the pros. Let's see, Neville is manning the audio soundboard, this huge mixer, and we guys like big equipment. I hear the girls do too. And Nev is, you should see this big equipment that Nev has over here. It's amazing. And he's manning the soundboard, Neville Bounds. Yay. And we have multi-camera video, and that is manned by the expert video technician, Matthew Smith. Yay! All right, and for some reason they didn't want microphones. They shied away from that. I don't know why. But anyway, so here we are at the Wings Over Pittsburgh. Now we're going to have our special recording tomorrow night, Saturday night, and we're going to have other professional aviation aviation podcasters joining us as well. Yeah, not professional. I'm not sure any of us really get paid for doing this, and there's a good reason for that, I think. But anyway, we're going to be doing a big party and meetup tomorrow night, but we thought, it's about time for us to do our weekly episode. Well, why not do an episode while we're here? We just finished listening to the awesome Plain Talking UK podcast, co-hosted by Matt and Carlos. And Carlos is going to be our man with the roving microphone tonight or this afternoon. And anyway, so we're going to just try to do kind of a sort of a normal show and cover, do our normal format, talk a little bit about the news and cover some feedback and that sort of thing. And if you want to enjoy fun and frivolity and no structure whatsoever, then tomorrow night is your show. So that's all I have to say about that.
All right.
All right. So we always start the episode. If any of you have ever listened to the Airline Pilot Guy show,
No.
Oh, okay. So
No,
what we do?
I don't recognize any faces
So
out
what
there.
we
I mean,
do
a bunch
is-
of strange people have showed up at the hotel.
we kind of catch up with each other's what's going on during the week and all that kind of stuff. And let's start with Dr. Steph. How's your week been going?
So my week has actually, at work it was very busy. But last weekend I was actually on the other side of the state of Pennsylvania in Pittsburgh. In Philadelphia. I'm in Pittsburgh right now. See, the problem is they named the state Pennsylvania, and then the two big cities are Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, and they all start with P, and that just gets confusing.
Too much
So-
alliteration for
Yeah,
Dr. Steph.
yeah, exactly. Yes, just to be clear, currently in Pittsburgh, was in Philadelphia last weekend. Reason I was there was for the Broad Street run. Met up with a bunch of friends from med school and did that, and that was really nice. Actually had a very nice, fast time. Really happy with the effort there, and it was great to see all my friends there. Leading with my stomach, too, I managed to get all the major Philadelphia food groups, soft pretzels, cheese steaks. What else did I have while I was there? Crab fries. Can't forget the crab fries.
Crab fries.
Yes. Chickies and Pete's.
Oh.
Micah had a good suggestion for a restaurant that I need to get to in the future, which I was not aware of, so it's next on the list. At Ralph's. Yep. Italian, I hear. So we'll definitely plan on doing that. But yeah, it's been a good week. Glad to be up here in Pittsburgh. Get my
That's right.
Pennsylvania town names correct. And really looking forward to the air show this weekend and catching up with everyone that's here.
Great. And Captain Nick, was your journey over from the UK to Coriopolis a nice, easy one, relaxing? Did that go around? all right?
Absolutely, absolutely, Jeff. It was a pleasure to sit in upper class in Acme Red after a nice visit to the lounge where I had some breakfast, early start, but then cruised our way across the Atlantic, landed in lovely Atlanta, and then unfortunately we were faced with the task of moving on to Pittsburgh with Acme. And now I always had a very high opinion of Acme, but after I'd been thrown off 2 flights, well, actually I didn't even get as far as being thrown off. I didn't even get onto the airplane. They obviously took one look at me and went, no, we're not having it one. I began to wonder if I was ever going to get here. But, you know, lucky old me, they obviously didn't work it out when I pulled my cap down across my face and just strolled on the airplane. They let me on the 3rd time. So, bit of a late arrival, but so glad to be here.
Well, you didn't make the mistake of mentioning my name, did you? That might be part of the problem.
You work for Acme? Oh, of course you do. Yes, you
Yes.
do. You know, I forgot about that. No, I've had a great week. I had a couple of interesting things happen. You got contacted by a journalist, Kristen Lee Painter, who is writing an article for the Conte Nast magazine. And you obviously cold-shouldered her and passed her on to me. So that was fine. So we did an interview, and apparently on the basis of that, she'll be writing an article, which you may subsequently find, about what airline pilots do in the cruise. It was a pretty short interview. So I couldn't tell really what pilots
I was
do
going to
in the
say, how open were you about all that? There's a reason why I sent her your way. No, because she was looking for long-haul pilots.
That's very true, yeah.
And I said, well, you know, it's been a while. I have flown long haul, but it's been quite some time, and things probably have changed. And so I know just the guy to interview, Captain Nick. So.
Well, you know how I can blather on. So we actually chatted for over an hour. So I don't know how I managed to string that out. I mean, that's longer than you actually spend on some flights, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yep.
it is.
And in addition, I saw a request from the Pilot magazine in the UK. There's the editor is Philip Whiteman. Pilot magazine is quite a well-known magazine, and I don't know how far around the world it goes, but certainly in the UK. And he was looking for, I learned about flying from that stories. So recalling one of my plain tales, I rewrote it and submitted it, and he was delighted with that. He's going to put it in his June publication. And I did mention that I was coming here and I could take some pictures and perhaps write up a little review of Wings over Pittsburgh, and he said he'd love to see that. And then I thought, well, perhaps some of my old plain tales could be submitted, and he said he'd like to see those as well. So you never know, perhaps we'll get a bit of a regular appearance there. I certainly made sure that I included the Airline Pilot Guy show in my text, so that hopefully we'll pick up a few listeners from that.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Well deserved. And look for a book in the future. Actually, that might be a good idea. Compile all those plain tales and publish a book.
You know, I never thought of
And
that.
I could add author to your list of accomplishments. Or maybe not.
Too
Tack
kind.
himself in there as editor. You know.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey, you know, last week I did the APG by myself, old school. I called it edition solo. It was kind of fun, actually. It's been a while since I've done that. A little weird, but I really do enjoy my.
You are a
co-hosts.
little weird, Jeff.
Yeah, I know. I'm more than a little weird. But I was listening to the show because sometimes, and podcasters out here, you'll vouch for this. Sometimes you do a show, especially those of us who edit the show and upload them and are kind of responsible for all that. Sometimes you put it out there and then all of a sudden there's like a 30-minute segment of silence. And so, you know, we always fear that something like that's going to happen. So I was listening to the show after I published it, and then I realized how many mistakes that I made. And so let's see. The first one, I think I said it was April 5th, and you know, Cinco de Mayo is not April 5th; it's May 5th. So I got that wrong. And then I also said the 100 LL, which is the fuel that general aviation airplanes, most of them use. I said 100 low level. That's low levels of lead, but it's actually low lead, I think, technically. So I kind of messed that one up. And then the other thing that I kind of screwed up was I kept mispronouncing Captain Nick's favorite layover destination. And I kept saying Legos, like the things that you play with, little toys. No, but it's, let me see if I can do this right. Lagos? Lagos.
No,
Lagos.
Lagos.
It's actually Lagos. You were saying Lagos. And I wouldn't mind going to Lagos,
I still don't know
wherever
how to
that
say it.
is, but
Lagos.
it's Lagos.
Lagos. Lagos.
L-A-Y, Lay?
I'll record you saying it, and then every time I need to say it, I'll just play the recording as a sound clip.
Lagos.
That's all right. I couldn't remember what town I was in just last weekend, so you're in good company here.
And I'm sure those are just a few mistakes that I made from the last show. I'm sure there are more, but I just wanted to, be honest about it and, make sure that people listening understand that I understand that I'm wrong. And I don't need just my wife to tell me that. I could do that myself. Let's see. We are here. We're wearing, some of us are wearing Airline Pilot Guide gear. If you want to get some good merchandise from either Redbubble or Teespring, Captain Nick is proudly wearing an Acme shirt. It's personalized with his name. So he's probably the only one that will buy that. Airplane Geeks is not available on our APG store, but Brian is proudly wearing his shirt, and it's a good-looking shirt, by the way. And so anyway, check out the APG store by heading over to the airlinepilotguy.com website and clicking on APG store. And let's see. That's all I can think of for now. We should probably move on to the coffee fund. What do you think? I think so. Here we go.
Johnny, how much more coffee? No thanks.
I love coffee. I love tea. I love the Java Jive and it loves me. I don't know if you can hear everybody sing in the audience. Let's turn the microphone around.
Cup, a cup, a cup, a cup, a cup.
Okay, that's enough. All right. Whoops, Mr. Moto, I'm a coffee pot. All right. While they're singing in the background, let me tell you about the Coffee Fund. That's your way to contribute to the Airline Pilot Guy show. And if you want to do so, head over to airlinepilotguy.com/coffee. And since the last show, we've had several people. I think they wanted to help out, actually, the beer fund and other such things that we're consuming here at the hotel in Pittsburgh. And let's see, I'd like to shout out to David Abbey. He sent in a contribution, and he said, you specifically use this for beer. Okay, we'll do that. And so thank you, David, for that. Jeff Muller, here's a toast to David.
Yay!
Yay, David! Cheers!
And let's see, Jeff Muller sent in his recurrent contribution via the PayPal Classic Fund. Andrew Wilson, Mark Rodia, Victor Barrito de Berm. How'd I do with that one? Is that okay? I don't know.
Sounds
and
good
of
to
course, Nico Rieger from Germany. And so thank you all of you for contributing to the Coffee Fund Classic method. And we also have some new patrons to the show. That's via patreon.com, where people can contribute a certain amount of money per episode, and we have 3 new patrons: Rob Simmons, Ben Richards, and Luis Caceres. I have no idea.
I think that was close.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't speak that language, but I think that I got kind of close there. So anyway, again, if you want to contribute and you have the ability to do so, please check out the Coffee Fund, airlinepilotguy.com/coffee. And now it's time for the news. Uh-oh. Bad boys. And girls. Yeah, we're going to start with one of so many articles out there involving passengers and air crews not exhibiting their best behaviors. And of course, this latest one, well, at least not the latest one, but the last one that I have in our news folder, is the actually, it didn't even happen on an airplane. It happened in an airport.
Yeah, it happened in the terminal.
Yeah, so I think the story, the headline shouldn't be, Spirit Airlines, air crews not flying airplanes. It should be people not acting like adults.
Pretty much. That would sum it up a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm sure many of you saw the video of this where I guess Spirit pilots and the management are having they're negotiating. And
That's a nice way to put
they're
it.
taking some job actions. And we're not going to get into how we feel about all that kind of thing, but apparently Spirit had to cancel several flights, and some of the passengers at Fort Lauderdale were not very happy, and some had actually boarded the airplane, and then I guess the pilots didn't show up. They decided that we can't fly this flight, so get off the airplane, please, and they had to go to the ticket counter to get their refunds, and apparently.
I think they canceled something like 81 flights on Sunday.
Oh,
it was
that's
a
all.
lot of flights.
That's probably all the flights that Spirit has on Sunday.
Yeah, it's probably close.
Wow.
So
So-
they weren't flying a lot of planes. So there were a lot of people kind of stuck who were expecting to go from point A
And
to
these were
point B.
unhappy people.
Very unhappy people.
And they were basically rioting
Yeah.
in the ticket
Fort
counter
Lauderdale.
area in Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just, what do you say about this? I mean, we've seen so much of this. I mean, I think the latest one I saw that they're playing on the social media and TV is the Southwest Airlines, two passengers, fisticuffs, just, beating the snot out of each other. I don't know. We talk about this almost every week now. That's kind of a recurring theme. What do we do about it? I don't know. Let's start behaving like civilized people. How about?
Yeah, I think that. So we'll put a plea out there,
Yes.
if you're traveling, if you're in the airport.
For the kids.
Be nice to each other. It's not that hard. You might enjoy your time a little bit more. You might not end up in jail. Bonus.
Yes.
Mind you, I can understand the problem, Jeff, because the stress of going through an airport and being subjected to queues and hassle and security, and then finally, your people just escalate, and it happens very quickly, and it takes a really determined and capable staff, and I'm not quite sure how many sort of staff Spirit can afford to have standing around sorting these problems out. But people who are going to organize things and fix things and make it better for the passengers. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of problems. And if Spirit knew there was going to be a hassle, and they still let people board aircraft which they suspected were going to be cancelled, then, more fool them.
Yeah, that is true. Good point. So it was all Spirit's fault, not the passengers. No, I guess everybody shares a little bit of blame there. All right, moving on to this incident from the Aviation Herald. SkyWest CRJ 200 at Chicago on the 1st of May. They had cargo smoke indication. They were climbing out of Chicago when the crew donned their oxygen masks, stopped the climb at 6,000 feet, reporting cargo smoke, and diverted to Chicago DePage Airport for a safe landing about 10 minutes after departure. The crew requested to turn into the wind after landing, then advised they had been discharging fire agent into the cargo bay, requested fire services to inspect the cargo bay. Following emergency services reported not seeing any smoke, the aircraft continued to the terminal. Passengers disembarked normally via stairs. Firefighters subsequently reported that they could smell smoke. They said almost immediately after becoming airborne, haze occurred in the cabin. Flight attendant initially attempted to calm them down, advising it was only mist. However, there was also a clear smell of smoke. Shortly thereafter, the passengers noticed that the aircraft was maneuvering to land. And so I think this crew did a really nice job. Some people were complaining, passengers, that they landed at DePage and not back at Chicago O'Hare, because that was kind of an inconvenience for them. I don't think they realize how how important it is to get an airplane on the ground.
Smoke in the aircraft you probably want to be on the ground as quick as possible. Whatever is the nearest airport is where you're going.
Yeah, they did a great job.
Yeah.
They got it on the ground, and everybody's still alive. And great thinking by the pilot to turn into the wind, to make sure that the smoke was trailing away from the airplane. These are the kind of things that we have to think about when we're in an emergency situation like this.
Yeah, you're quite right, Jeff. Cargo fires have caused some appalling accidents in the past that have resulted in huge losses of life. So anyone who thinks that it's not a good idea to land at the nearest suitable airfield is, I'm afraid, fooling themselves.
Right. Well, in the news, I've been waiting for you to. I think you're the one that threw it in there. If you want to talk about that.
I don't see that.
Oh, you
don't
don't see
see
it?
that.
Okay. Well, we're not going to talk about it then.
Okay.
I think then what that means is we should move on to. Yes. All right. We'll do that again.
Captain, incoming message.
All right. We'll do that again.
If you put it there, I'll happily talk about it. Was that the one where Airbus have...
Still in my folder.
Okay. Well, give me your folder. There's a lot of pointing going on over there.
Yeah, I don't know. I must be doing something wrong.
What, Jeff? You see, perhaps a senior moment for Jeff.
Jeff had a senior moment.
I'm not
You know
doing
what?
anything wrong.
I've got a
doctor-
prescription for that actually.
Yeah, the doctor might have something for Jeff for his senior
Okay.
moments.
So, oh, I'm stuck in my chair here.
Jeff's thing is a very quiet.
What?
You should be fine then.
The sound clips? Yeah, that was.
So we have these. These are the senior moment mints for Captain Jeff for his. I should have presented them earlier when he was doing his error announcements for the last.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Is such a thoughtful gift. I appreciate that. I'll keep these on me. I'll keep these on me.
Show them to the camera.
Should I look in the camera?
No, show them to the
Oh,
camera.
thank you. Okay, I don't do this thing very much. Here you go. Senior moment pills or mints. Thank you.
I'll tell you where those really came from later on, but that's fine.
Okay. So let's move on through. Let's push through my senior moment and do your feedback. Yeah.
Captain, incoming message.
Good enough. Okay. Let's get to the best part of the show, which, of course, we always say is your feedback. Let's see. We're here at a military air show for the most part. And I've been flying with a lot of people. In fact, the last co-pilot I flew with, new guy, flies for the, what do they call the squadron that does the, is it not Avengers? It's the, what do they call the help me out.
Give him some more senior moment.
Huh?
Yeah, have a mint.
Have a
Oh,
moment,
okay.
it'll come to you.
Let me open up my senior moment mints.
Hey, well, we've got a.
It starts with an A, and they fly
Airplane?
these F-5s against other. Thank
Aggressors.
you, aggressors. Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner. Winner, winner. Chicken Air Force. Aggressors. Thank you. I was looking for you. I didn't know you were sitting way back there. I thought you were sitting up here. Okay. Anyway, he is an aggressor pilot based in. Hang on. Let me take my mint. Nope. Key West. Oh, shoot, you're right. It was Navy.
Have another mint.
They both.
I guess I need to take some more of these mints. Yeah. Anyway, now I've forgotten exactly why I was even talking about it. Anyway, this whole thing I was going to talk about the Air Force, but it's all military pilots here in the country. We're having we talk about the pilot shortage on our show a lot. We think we're having a problem in the civilian world with pilot shortage. The military is really, really hurting. And I've flown with a bunch of military people recently, and they said, yeah, you're not going to believe how bad things are in the military, the Air Force and Navy, et cetera. And so we thought that we'd throw an article in here about this critical pilot shortage due to the private commercial airlines hiring. And then also kind of associated with this is this article, which I think is kind of applies to the situation. Air Force to allow average-looking, uncool people to become fighter pilots. And we have you'll have to look at the pictures from the article in the show notes. This is out of Langley Air Force Base, Virginia. Due to manning cuts and years of major airliners paying higher wages for sweet abs, the U.S. Air Force Air Combat Command may begin allowing normal people to become fighter pilots as early as 2020, sources report. They say that Air Force General David L. Goldfein addressed a crowd of shirtless pilots at a post-volleyball match early last week, informing them that due to manning cuts in previous years, some pilots were forced to finish early and leave many units flaccid. Air Force policy requires that each flying squadron maintain enough pilots to publish 4 consecutive 12-month calendars without seeing the same half-naked pilot more than once. That's what he said to the glistening aviators. We may be forced to recruit back some talent, which we know will be difficult due to their hectic modeling schedules. Anyway, it goes on to talk about the fact that they're having to, actually lower the bar quite a bit in allowing uncool people or average-looking people to be allowed to fly as fighter pilots. The last paragraph sums it up. As long as they oil up beforehand and don't skip leg day, they shouldn't have any issues becoming proud and successful aviators, said Larry Knight, a critic of the Air Force's exclusion of uncool people like him, a policy that forced him to become a loser Army helicopter pilot instead. Wow. Just wanted to say I have nothing personally against Army helicopter pilots or any other branch of the service. So. No, I have nothing against loser helicopter pilots either. All right, so thought that was kind of funny. We'll put the links to that in the show notes. I thought this was interesting, and I've been kind of holding off on this piece of feedback until Nick was here to comment on it. And let's see, this is from Jan. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Jan. I live near Munich Airport in Germany. While I was a student, I was an active glider pilot and later on also an instructor in our Students Glider Club. Since then, I have a job. Instead of flying the smaller planes myself, I sit quite often in the bigger ones as a passenger. I listened to your show since about a half a year now, and this is my first feedback question I can send in. It's about the Airbuses Captain Nick is driving. It's well known that an A340 only takes off and climbs because the Earth bends down below it. I didn't say that, he did. But I really would like to hear Nick's thoughts about the Air France A340 300 incident in Bogota, as they obviously had a big issue with their takeoff performance. And then he points us to the Aviation Herald article. And so now we're all opening it up on our computers.
Standing by,
because I forgot to include it in the notes.
You like a bit of editing.
Well, I'm there. What's wrong with you, lot?
You like a bit of editing.
Do you want to read
Yes.
it? Should I read it? Let me try.
Please do, Steph.
Sure. So this was an incident, France A340-300 at Bogota, March 11th, 2017, abnormally long takeoff run. So an Air France Airbus A340 performing a flight from Bogota to Charles de Gaulle with 275 people, blah, blah, blah. Departed Bogota's runway 13 right, and continued to Paris for a safe landing without further incident. So that runway is 3,800 meters, 12,470 feet long, at an elevation of 8,360 feet above sea level. So on April 25th, the BEA reported that the aircraft needed an abnormally long takeoff run. The occurrence was rated a serious incident and is being investigated by the BEA, having been delegated the investigation by Colombia's GRIAA. According to preliminary information, the aircraft crossed the runway end at about 5 feet above ground instead of 35 feet above ground level. The airline reported a similar occurrence also happened on April 4th to the same aircraft. As an immediate safety action, the airline reduced the maximum takeoff weight permitted for Bogota by 5 to 8 tons. By 5 to 8 tons total, either less cargo or less fuel, perhaps requiring a fuel stop at Guadalupe as suitable. Is being considered to use the Boeing 787 in the future, should the A340-300 available performance turn out as the cause. Captain Nick, go.
That's a great idea, but I just like...
Well, I could sit here and try and defend the A340-300, but we all know that the 300 had CFM engines, the CFM 56, and for its takeoff weight at about 250 tons, they weren't huge engines. So, and I flew that aircraft for quite a while, and we were all aware that it had didn't have an excess of power in the takeoff regime.
What'd you call those engines? Hair dryers or something?
Yeah, that's right. I'm sure CFM would be very impressed. It's like having 4 APUs. One on your tail made 5. It wasn't brilliant. But having said that, there are very few flying now. Now, it doesn't actually matter what airplane and what engines you've got. If you calculate your performance right, it'll get airborne. And if you're carrying too much weight, you take it off. Take the weight off, that is, not the aircraft. So if the airline involved made the mistake of putting too much weight in for the performance of the aircraft involved, considering this was quite a high elevation. I mean, that's over 8,000 feet, pretty high for any aircraft to operate. Then it's just a mistake in overloading the aircraft, and not actually a factor of what the aircraft type is. You can overload any airplane, and it'll struggle to get off any runway. For me, this was an incident which really involved a performance issue, not an aircraft type. Having said that, I'm not going to try and defend the 340-300. I remember getting out of Hong Kong in that Jeff one trip, and we weren't using them out of hot countries very much. But we got out of Hong Kong. It was a really hot day with a low trop, which meant that we were going to have quite high temperatures all the way up the climb, and we were only trying to get up to, which was metric altitude, so it would have been the equivalent of about 49,000, just over 29,000 feet. And it took me nearly an hour to climb the aircraft up to the cruise altitude. When you think about it, climbing up to less than 30,000 feet would normally take you 15, 20 minutes.
So as an example, I had an hour-long flight here today, and I know we were up close to or above that altitude.
There you go.
For
Absolutely.
most of the flight.
So because it was so warm and we were pretty damn heavy, it was just taking us forever to get up there and establish in the cruise. Now, the aircraft, we don't have that aircraft in Acme Red anymore. We've sent them all on to other airlines. And we fly the 340-600, which is a different beast completely. I mean, the power to weight ratio of the 340-600 is very impressive. And when we first climbed into it, we went, whoa, this is just great. This is as it should have been when the 340 was first brought into service. So we carry an extra nearly 100 tons, or in fact more than 100 tons extra, and we get up to there in a much more normal at a climb rate. But those early 340-300s were not good performers. But that doesn't excuse it being overloaded at Bogota and getting off the runway at 5 feet above the ground. Well, let's not forget that I thought it was a fence height of 30 feet. Al, is that right? On a dry day and 15 on a wet day, on a wet figures, but...
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, so they're actually only 10 feet below the requirement. So that's actually not huge, because you think about it, on a normal day, on a wet runway, you're only required to be 15 feet above the ground when you get to the end of the runway. Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, it was just a consideration I had, and I've just had to nip out, so you might have covered this in my absence. But as this is an occurrence that's happened more than once out of Bogota, one consideration would have been actually the weight on the cargo manifest versus the actual weight on board the aircraft. Because I'm pretty certain that Air France use electronic takeoff performance, so it's not uncommon under that basis to have a stop margin of 0 feet. So in other words, you've literally are at maximum performance. So if the cargo happens to be significantly heavier than what's on the manifest, and therefore the performance that's calculated, which, without making, any sweeping statements, may well prove to be the case. I mean, if someone's, receiving a little bit of under-the-counter, manipulation to get extra cargo on the aircraft,
absolutely.
then, that might well explain why the performance of the aircraft hasn't actually lived up to what it should have done.
Yeah. Yeah, so whilst I appreciate the joke of the Earth's curvature, that's not the first aircraft type it's been applied to. We used to, in the Air Force, used to say the Jaguar only got airborne because the Earth curved away, and that when one engine failed, the other one was there to take it to the scene of the crash.
And you know what? I really don't think he appreciated it.
Having said that, it was a great question. Thanks very much for bringing it on board.
Yes, thank you, Jan, for your feedback. Now, I'd like to play some special feedback from somebody, submitted by somebody here that is with us live in the audience. Her name, Barbara. Yeah, Barbara Parish, and it's a great story. So let's take a listen.
Hello, Captain Jeff and everyone on the APG crew. It's Barbara here. I wanted to share with you and the listeners my personal family story that would kind of fit into Captain Nick's Plain Tales category. Although this story at its heart is a sad and tragic one, it is also very interesting, and it has taken my mother and I years to piece together. This story is also one that remains a mystery, and I often ask myself, have I found all there is to know? I am not sure, but I will provide photos and information in the show notes. Before I begin, I would like to start by saying this feedback is dedicated to my maternal grandfather, my mother's father, Zdenek Schwartz, and who is the focus of this story. This precious life we have can be long and blessed, or can be taken from us in the blink of an eye. My two grandfathers' lives were no exception to this rule, and although this true story is about my maternal grandfather, Zdenek, I wanted to first put this story into perspective by briefly mentioning my paternal grandfather, my father's father, Grandad Fred Parish, and how different their lives were to turn out. My father's father, Grandad Fred Parish, was from southeast London. A true and proud Englishman was my grandfather Fred, as I remember him. He was the youngest sergeant major in the British Army during World War II, and he was lucky in that his time during the war was spent training up the British Army and other men to fight. He also trained the famous Czech resistance fighters who came to Britain during the war to learn how to fight their Nazi occupiers. Little did Grandad Fred know at that time just how much Czechoslovakia, as it was then named, was to become intertwined with him and our family during the war and in the years to come. Eventually my English Grandad Fred's luck ran out, and the time came for him to fight on the battlefields of Europe, and in June 1944 he set sail from England with the D-Day invasion fleets to France. Before he left, he said goodbye to his new wife, my grandmother Mary, and their newly born child, my father, not knowing if he would ever see them again. My other grandfather, Grandad Zdenek Schwartz, my mother's father, who is the focus of this story, was a young unmarried man when the Nazis invaded his homeland of Czechoslovakia. After Nazi investigations, my family were deemed to be without any Jewish blood, but my grandfather, like so many Czech men, were forced into slave labour to work in the Nazi weapons factories. He hated it and eventually, after a long time, managed to escape, and he fled to the Czech mountains, and there he hid until the end of the war, knowing that if he were captured, he could face execution. Victory and peace came in 1945, and thankfully both of my grandfathers survived the war. English Grandad Fred returned to London to my grandmother and baby son, and Grandad Zdenek returned to his home city of Prague, met and married his new love and wife, Jarmila, and in 1948 my mother was born. But the storm clouds of tragedy were looming once more on the horizon for Grandad Zdenek, including the dark days of Russian communist rule over Czechoslovakia. For a time, Grandad Zdenek's life continued to thrive, and after the war, he became a professional ice hockey player, becoming a member of the Czech national team, and it was Grandad Zdenek's Czech team who taught the Russians how to play competitive ice hockey to Olympic standards. Then one day, the English ice hockey teams, once again, here is where these two countries strangely collide in my family's history, invited the Czech national team to take part in a couple of exhibition games in England. The year was 1948, and my mother was only 10 months old. The Czech team accepted the invitation, and in November 1948, the Czech team flew from Prague to Paris, Le Bourget Airport, and from there would get connecting flights to London. When they arrived safely at Le Bourget, Paris, a fateful decision was made. They decided to split the ice hockey team onto two different flights, and my granddad was to fly in the second plane, a Beechcraft Model 18 Twin Beech. There were 6 team members on board and 2 pilots. The airline was Mercure, a small air taxi charter company, and it is believed the French owner of the airline was one of the pilots who flew the plane and who was also a pilot war hero during World War II. Weather reports for the English Channel was not good, with heavy fog, and apparently there was a discussion pre-flight about the baggage being heavy. The date was the 8th of November, 1948. The first plane took off and landed in London, where the team of 8 waited for the rest to arrive. They waited and waited and waited, but decided to carry on, and they began a match at Wembley without their teammates. The English team showed great sportsmanship after half-time and decided to play with only 8 men too. But their teammates never arrived, for the plane on which my grandfather was flying just simply vanished from radar without a trace. Some reports say over the English Channel off Dieppe, France. There was no wreckage ever found, and to this day no one knows what happened to that plane and all on board. There is one intriguing rumour that one of the pilot's body was found the next year, in 1949, floating in the English Channel. But this terrible accident was not the end of the story, for the loss of the plane was to have far-reaching tragic consequences for more than just the people on board that lost aircraft. The Czech ice hockey players returned home, but on return home, they fell under immediate suspicion by the communist authorities, particularly the ice hockey players that were high profile or considered the real stars of the team. The secret police interrogated them, and many of the team were taken from their families, arrested by the communist authorities, and accused of plotting to defect to the West. This, the communists claimed, is what happened to the lost plane and team members. The plane hadn't crashed, but had defected to the West. They had staged their own deaths and were living abroad. Accusations lasted for years, and virtually all the players were sentenced to hard labour, some for 10 to 15 years. As punishment, some of the team was sent to the uranium mines, and one particular player suffered with cancer as a result and was sent home to die. One of the widows was to be denied having any paid work or job, even though she had a daughter to support. My mother was only a small baby when her father's plane disappeared. The families were not allowed to have any memorial to the lost on the plane, and no insurance was paid to the family for years because no wreckage had been found. And when eventually the payment was allowed, the communists took much of the insurance money themselves. Eventually, in the years to come, the communist authorities changed their minds and recognised and accepted the French official air accident investigation reports that it was a tragic air crash. Eventually, a memorial was allowed, and the lost team, who were posthumously given a prestigious award called Masters of Sport. But it was too little too late for the families of those who had suffered persecution, and for the player who lost his life from uranium poisoning. So where do I believe my granddad went down? Not far from my homeland, I believe. The accepted but not proved theory between my mum and I is that the plane crashed into the English Channel, and on the few occasions I have looked out to sea over the white cliffs of Dover, and I know Captain Jeff has flown over the white cliffs of Dover, I have a strong feeling that's where the plane is. That would explain why no wreckage was found in France or England. Was the weather the cause? Reports at the time said that the weather conditions in the English Channel was not good, very foggy, but who knows why. I have never seen the official investigation report and would love to do so. If I had all the money in the world, I would hire a salvage team to scour the seabed. But the English Channel is littered with wrecks. Every time I fly over it or cross on a ferry, I think about Grandad Zdenek, the Grandad I never knew, and whom my mother never knew as a father, and who died aged only 29. Just like the families of the victims of Malaysian Airlines flight MH370, it must be terrible to never have closure. My grandmother never really got over the loss of her young husband. Despite being widowed in her early 20s, my grandmother never married again and has remained a widow all her life. She is 90 years old. 2 years ago I went to visit her in Australia, where she has lived for many years. To this day she still doesn't really talk about it, but my grandmother still holds a candle to my granddad, surrounded by photos of him in his ice hockey days. And I will provide some of those photos in the show notes and some information. My English granddad Fred, unlike my granddad Zdenek, lived a much fuller life. He saw his child grow up, and who would eventually marry a Czech lady from Prague, my mother. He had a fantastic full career as a policeman and detective in Scotland Yard, and saw his grandchildren grow. How different lives can be. So this is dedicated to the memory of my granddad Zdenek, his ice hockey teammates, whom I shall list in the show notes, and all the souls lost on that flight to London. But also, this is dedicated to the innocent other half of the team, for whom many suffered terribly as a consequence of political evil because of the tragic loss of a plane. If there is anyone out there who can bring me more information on the crash, it would be very much appreciated. And please forward it to Captain Jeff, and he can send it on to me. Information will be included with the photos. So thank you, Captain Jeff, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you and the APG crew and everyone at Pittsburgh.
Wow. What an amazing story. Thank you, Barbara, for doing that. It was such a wonderful and melancholy story, but I don't know. Oh, wait, we need to get a microphone on Miss Barbara.
Thank you, Captain Jeff, for telling that story. It means a lot to me and my mum. My mum was quite moved when she heard the recording, so thank you. It means quite a lot. I just want to add that, when you never find your relative that's gone missing, there's always that little bit of doubt. And my grandmother, when she was quite old, she visited Canada, and she went to the museum there that's dedicated to ice hockey, just to see if she could find his name somewhere on a list or anywhere that would indicate maybe he had defected, but she never found anything. So there's always that little bit of doubt, but we believe that the plane did crash. But thank you for
Well,
playing this
it would be
story.
wonderful to have that kind of closure, as you mentioned. The victims of the families of MH370 and.
Just say as well in the chat room, everyone in the chat room absolutely loved that story, Barbara. So well done.
Yeah.
An amazing, multifaceted story, Barbara. You joined so many areas together. You must have taken quite a lot of time to research that. I know it's probably all in your family history, but it does take a lot of work. It's beautifully told. Thank you very much.
Okay, that was great. Well, moving on, I think this is something the doctor might be able to help with. This is Alex Stroud. He says, Alex Stroud here. I feel like I'm almost harassing you. Yes, Alex, if you're listening, stop. You're harassing me. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry for that, but I had one more question. I'm currently taking, and you heard him, one more question. This is it,
One more.
Alex. That's
Yep,
all.
you're cut off after this.
Yep.
It's
I'm currently taking sertraline,
Sertraline.
an antidepressant, as a result of a stay in the mental health unit in my hometown hospital. I was just wondering if this would affect my ability to get a pilot's license, private or commercial, and would it stop an airline from considering me? I'm happy for you to talk about this on the show, as some people in similar situations might find this helpful, but not have enough confidence to ask themselves. Thanks for your patience, and I love the show. Good flying, Alex Stroud. Now, if you remember, Alex, I believe, is in Australia, and I think he's 19 years old, and he
Yes.
wants to become a commercial airline pilot, and I don't know. I mean, first of all, I'd like to say, Alex, it's very brave of you to mention or even ask this type of question, because, a lot of people are concerned about mental health and what people might think of you if you had some.
Sure. So first of all, I'll start off by saying that sertraline, commonly known here in the U.S. as Zoloft, is a very, very common antidepressant. It falls in the SSRI category. Those are a very commonly prescribed class of medications for people with anxiety and depression, and we see it all the time. It causes headache for me because some of the pain relievers that I like to prescribe don't interact well with sertraline and other SSRIs. So I do see people on it very commonly, so you're certainly not alone there in taking that medication, so it's a really good question. I don't have the information for Australia, but I can tell you what the FAA here in the U.S. says about it. And basically, it's a case-by-case basis, so it's not something that your regular aviation medical examiner would be able to sign you off on necessarily. They would need more information, and they would probably dig pretty deep into your medical history there. But it says basically that they can consider you for a special issuance or special consideration, and then there's a couple different basically conditions that they would consider. So if it was being prescribed for certain diagnoses, they list several different ones here. Or if you've been clinically stable on it for a very significant amount of time, and they can document all of that. If it's just a single medication that you're using, if you don't have any other, you haven't expressed any desires to harm yourself, harm other people, those are big things that they're looking for. But again, it's a case-by-case basis, so they're really going to take a lot of different things into consideration and take a look at that. So that's what the FAA says here about sertraline.
Stephen Ivy in our audience has something to say.
I do. I actually used to be on Zoloft, and I actually had to come off of it before I could get my medical license for my third class. They gave me two options. I could either go through the approval process, which could take up to a year, or you could elect to come off of it yourself and then wait to go back to the medical doctor and see if you could, just pass a little check and stuff.
6 months? Or six? It was a certain amount of time that you had to be off
at
of
the
it.
time that was going on. I'd only been on it for about a year, so it was. They said, go back, look at your medical records. I had to pull them from a couple of different doctors, and they, evaluated and said, yeah, if you just elect to come off of it, we can give you your medical and go from there. But if you do get it, it's an extremely long process. I know a couple other guys that are on it, and they elected just not to say anything about it and just kind of go with it, which that's not really a smart thing to do, especially if you're going to consider being a commercial airline pilot. But
right,
just was going to throw that out there for him. I know the rules are different in Australia, but
Yeah, I'd have to really kind of dig deep, and I'll probably go ahead and do that to just to make sure I have the correct information for Australia before I send that off. But I might send them an email directly once I find some more information about it. But yeah, like Stephen was saying, it's a case by case basis here. If you elect not to come off of it, it can be a very long time. Certainly, I've always been pretty vocal about being honest about your medical conditions, because if you're being treated for something or getting medications, there's a way that it can be found out, and it's better to be honest and be upfront about it and deal with it from there than the other way around in this case. So,
Stephen, I hope you don't mind me asking you this, and feel free to not answer, but what situation put you into the condition where you had to take that medication?
Yeah, so some of you might know I work in the power industry, do project controls for them, and I worked in Indiana for about 2 years. And I moved there. I didn't know anybody. I just stopped being a flight attendant, and I was on my own. And not having family there and everything just triggered some anxiety for a couple different reasons and everything. And I actually went on it for a year and didn't have any medication, and then I finally went to the doctor, and they said, yeah, you have anxiety and some depression and everything. And I stayed on it up until about another year later, till I wanted to go be a pilot. And, the doctor was like, you really don't need it, just because my lifestyle had adjusted to that. I was closer to home. I was living in Birmingham at the time, and just my lifestyle had changed, and where I really didn't need it anymore. So, people that are on it, there's people out there that are, mental illness, you don't want to associate with them. But, it's a lifestyle thing. There's sometimes where there's stuff that goes on that you just don't have control over, and you need some help with it one way or another. So,
was it difficult to come off of it?
For me, it really wasn't. There were some times where there would be some anxiety kick in just because of work. And I still have that go on, but it's nowhere near as bad as it used to be. And I found different ways to cope with it. Actually, changed my diet a little bit, and also exercising has a lot to help with it too. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Now, I know there's an enormous amount of prejudice against those of us who have had a mental illness, and I'm like you. I have suffered in my career mental illness, so I also suffered from depression. It wasn't that long ago, and I was offline for 6 months. I was on antidepressants, and I found for myself cognitive behavior treatment was the path back to a stable situation. But I think the important things for all of us to realize is that when you get in this situation, you treat it like any other illness. It's just an imbalance of chemicals in the brain, and it doesn't necessarily put you in the situation where you're going to do any damage. But, of course, the first thing I did when I came to the conclusion that I wasn't happy with my life anymore was to tell my airline, and then we sought expert medical assistance. And I was only on the drugs for a very short time because I didn't like being on antidepressants. It's not a pleasant thing. And I found that really confronting the situation I was in and talking about it to other people was the road to me coming to terms with it. And after obviously going through all the required checks and balances, I was declared fit back to fly again. But I remember speaking to the company doctor when, because I was under obviously, I was under a professor of psychology I was under my own general practitioner and under the company doctor of all, as well as the civil aviation experts. I had to convince them all that I was fit to fly again. And but one of the things that everyone said was, you shouldn't have to tell people about this because of the prejudice you're likely to meet amongst the general public when they know that their pilot has, in inverted commas, had a mental illness. So depression is actually a very common thing, and although it's classed as a mental illness, we all know it's just perhaps a phase you might be going through because of stress. And in my case, that's exactly what it was. I was overstressed doing my job, and an excess of those fight and flight symptoms that we get when we're working so hard that we can't come down from a feeling of being on the edge. And that's what it was for me. I had to learn how to relax again and how to quietly enjoy my life. And part of it has been actually being on this show, because I get to express myself and meet wonderful people all around the world. But yeah, I think the more of us that are happy to admit the fact that we have suffered from depression, the easier it will be for other people to come out, and the less they're likely to suffer in silence.
Sure. And, you know, like Captain Nick said, I think that really kind of underscores how common the problem is, too. You know, we don't hear about it often, or people don't talk about it often, but this is a very, very, very commonly prescribed medication, at least here in the United States. And it's prescribed for a whole variety of reasons, like Stephen mentioned, like Captain Nick said, it can be for anxiety, it can be for depression. It doesn't necessarily mean that the symptoms are necessarily severe either. It can be that you just need a little bit of help getting through whatever your daily stressors are. So if you're taking it and you want to be a pilot, like I said, it's not, at least for the FAA, it's a case-by-case basis. So, you know, doesn't necessarily mean you have to come off of it either to get there, it looks like. So
I do think one of the problems as well is, and I think our royal family have done a very good job of that in the last couple of weeks, is that especially if you're a guy, and I speak from my own personal experience on this, it is something that's very, very difficult as a guy to talk about, to try and get your head round this whole sort of, I think half the battle is trying to admit that you do actually have something not wrong with you, but you do actually have a problem that you always have to acknowledge. It's a bit like, I suppose it's like Alcoholics Anonymous, isn't it? You've got to admit you've got a problem first, and then try and do something about it. But I think it is so much harder as a guy to actually, because we're not as, I mean, I'm very lucky in the fact that I've got very kind and supportive friends around me, but there are a lot of people I know who don't have that support network around there, and they certainly couldn't sit there and have a chat with their friends about the fact that, you know, they're depressed or they're miserable and they're having dark thoughts and things like that. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here when I say that it is very difficult for guys to just open up and talk about stuff, and I do think that's half the battle.
So great question, Alex. Thank you very much for bringing that up in the discussion. So, one more comment here.
Thank you, Stephen, for opening up the conversation.
And Alex, wow, I didn't realize how important his question was regarding that. This is great. So, yeah. Thank you, everybody, for your input regarding that. Now to a little bit lighter subject. Danielle sent us some feedback. Hi, APG crew. I'm a fairly new listener to your podcast, and I absolutely love it. Thank you so very much for what you do. I found your podcast from listening to... do we need to mention him?
No.
Okay.
No one that you all have ever heard of.
To Pilot Pip and the Plane Safety Podcast.
No. I'm wearing his hat here.
Let me just stop by saying that Pilot Pip is so sad that he couldn't be with us here in Pittsburgh. And Pilot Pip, if you're listening, we miss you, we love you, and we really appreciate everything. Yes. Well, almost
and
everything
we wish you were here.
Yeah.
Mostly.
Yeah, well, thanks for the hat.
Yeah. At least there's that. Yes. Anyway, he said, she says, which I love so much. I enjoy listening every day on my 45-minute commute back and forth to work in the Boston area. I do not have an aviation background at all. I'm an audiologist working with our country's veterans. But I do love to fly and travel and learn as much as I can about aviation. And I think many of our listeners fall right in that category. that they're just really interested in aviation, and they're not really connected to it directly, but they just it's part of their lives, and we appreciate all of you out there that are like that. Anyway, her question says, is Airbus related? I frequently fly JetBlue and most often am on the A320. I've noticed that if my seat is far forward enough, I can hear some repetitive beeps from the cockpit upon landing, similar sounding to the beeps heard during Captain Nick's introduction. I think she's talking about these beeps, maybe? And...
That's the mouse.
The mouse.
Yeah.
You have mice on the airplane?
She says, curious as to what these indicate. My apologies if this has been discussed in the past. I've listened to all the current podcasts, and I'm slowly making my way episode 1 in between new episodes. Ooh. Oh, you know what that means. That means
I'm so sorry, Danielle.
Has...
I'm so sorry.
Oh, not applause. She has this. The APG
dreaded,
syndrome.
Feared APG syndrome.
Yeah. Sorry. So sorry. And as far as we know, there is no cure.
Nope.
All right. So getting back again to her feedback, she says, I did skip ahead to episode 200, where Jeff was a blithering idiot. No, she didn't say that. After hearing Pilot Pip's episode discussing the meetup, and it was amazing, and it was a fun episode, and it was a great time. Anyway, big thanks to all of you for taking your time out of your busy schedules to create such a wonderful podcast. Wishing you all nothing but clear skies, Danielle. And so, would you please answer Danielle's question about those strange sounding beeps?
It's the cavalry. Al's going to nod, and I hope get it right. It is officially termed by Airbus the cavalry charge, and it's an indication that the pilot has just taken control of the aircraft away from all the automatics, and he is now manually flying it down to the runway to perform his perfect landing.
Oh, it's kind of like, warning.
Yes. Warning, Professor Robinson.
A human is flying the airplane. Watch out.
Al's going to say something now.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, it indicates either that the autopilot has been intentionally or unintentionally disconnected. So I just had an idea. So I thought I would go around the room. There are a few pilots here who fly aeroplanes with autopilot. So I thought that seeing as we've just discussed the noise that the Airbus makes, we'd go around and see if we can get some impersonations of the noises that their aeroplane makes. So I thought we'd start off with Jeff. Jeff's got to try and remember because he never puts the autopilot in.
Yes, I do.
So Jeff, what sort of noise does your aeroplane make when you disconnect the autopilot?
I'm trying to recall what it was. It's a challenge for us because when we disconnect the autopilot, we try to do it exactly right so that it doesn't make the warning sound. So if you disconnect, so the autopilot disconnect switch on the control yoke. So you
gag the autopilot.
Yes. So you you click it, and then if you click it,
it's an interesting night out with you,
so,
isn't it?
So what happens is when you click it once, the autopilot disconnects, and you get that annoying warning. And if you click it again, then it cancels the warning. And so what you do is you kind of click it, and then like a half second later, you click it again. And if you have any experience with this, you can do it so that it never makes that obnoxious warning.
Normally, when you click it twice, you get more noise.
Not on our airplane.
Oh, okay, that's just ladies. Okay, fair enough.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know what you were referring to. Yeah.
So you can't remember the noise that your aeroplane makes?
I need to look it up.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll come back to you. We'll give you some thinking time. Have a minute.
Give me a chance.
Okay, so can you remember what your aeroplane does? Okay, and you're ready now to broadcast to the world the noise it makes? Okay. Yeah. I flew the Embraer 145. So here we go. Autopilot. And just for comic effect, does it also do the same as the Embraer 145 did for when you go into the barber's pole at the high-speed end? You've never gone there, have you? Okay, all right.
Overspeed.
Well, no, actually, on the Embraer 145, if I remember rightly, it's been a few years, as you sort of went into the barber's pole at the high speed, it would go, high speed, in a female voice, almost like an encouragement. And then if you continue to accelerate, it would turn into a slightly more male Germanic style thing of high speed. So I kind of got the idea then. So who else? Steph, you fly the Cirrus, don't you?
Yes. It makes horrible beeping noise when you disconnect the autopilot, which I probably can't impersonate
you need
well.
to do the noise. You need to do the noise.
I'm just trying to remember how many beeps it actually makes. I think it's 2 beeps 3 times. Like, beep, beep. Like that. Is that right? I don't know.
No, that was just 2 beeps.
I know, but it does it a bunch of times. But hold on, I want to see if I'm... oops.
So what we're gradually getting the gist here is that most of the pilots don't actually know the noises.
No, I do know what it makes. I just can't impersonate
John, you have autopilot, yeah?
I have autopilot on the Trinidad, which is made in France. So I warn my passengers before because it's a very loud squawk. It goes, beep! Zut alors! Zut alors!
Zut alors.
Anybody else got an autopilot? No, Jeff.
I'm trying to find it. I'm trying to find it. Let's see what this one sounds like.
Fire left engine.
That's not it.
Fire right engine.
That's not it.
Fire right engine.
Let's see.
Autopilot.
That's it. Autopilot. Autopilot.
Stall. Brake. Hot lap.
You're an idiot. See how obnoxious Captain L is? I mean, these warnings are in the airplane.
Do you remember we were talking about Pilot Pip earlier? And apparently Pip's latest podcast, Lane Street in the chat room said that apparently Pip's latest podcast is entitled, not in a grumpy way at all, I'm Not in Pittsburgh.
The only one that isn't.
So sad.
Oh.
And also another comment in the chat room from Mariana. She's just realised that Captain Al speaks like a Valley girl. It's a US thing.
That's a very astute observation, Mariana.
So keep the comments coming in the chat room. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. You know what? It might be time for this week's installment of Plane Tales by the old pilot, old dot pilot. And all I have to do is just find it. Here it is.
The Old Pilot's Plane Tales, the Aviators of Pittsburgh. 1911 saw a young adventurer from Pittsburgh challenge the new world of aviation. Galbraith Perry Rogers Jr. was born on January the 12th, 1879, to a family with a long history of prestigious U.S. Navy service. But a childhood battle with scarlet fever left him partially deaf and ineligible for military service. Refusing to let his deafness inhibit his desire for adventure, Rogers was a romantic model of a daredevil at the time, 6 foot 4 inches tall and with an ever-present cigar wedged in his mouth. He was a football star, yachtsman and auto racer. At the age of 33, he found his calling. Rogers had visited the Wright Flying School, operated by the famous aviation pioneers and brothers, Orville and Wilbur Wright. There he saw an airplane for the first time and became fascinated with the idea of flying. Just 1 week after Rogers began taking classes at the school, he requested permission to take a solo flight, but he was denied due to lack of training, so, predictably, he responded by purchasing his own training plane. And on June the 12th, 1911, he made his first solo flight. After practicing with his plane for just over a month, Rogers passed the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale's flying examination on August the 7th, becoming only the 49th licensed aviator in the world. Less than a week later, whilst participating in the Chicago Airshow, A promoter asked Rogers if he would be interested in competing for a prize that the publisher, William Randolph Hearst, had recently offered. $50,000 was to be given to the first person who flew from coast to coast across America in fewer than 30 days. Rogers, unsurprisingly, accepted the challenge. He purchased a lightweight four-cylinder, 35-horsepower Model EX biplane from the Wright Company, the first ever sold to a private buyer. Rogers told Orville Wright of his plan to compete for the Hearst Prize, but Wright, doubting any modern plane's ability to travel so far, questioned Rogers' decision. An adventurer and risk-taker, though, he paid no attention. He secured sponsorship for his adventure from the Armour Meatpacking Company, which was promoting its new grape soda, Vin Fizz, the namesake of Rogers' plane. He had already won the $11,000 World Grand Endurance Aviation Contest in Chicago, staying in the air for 27 hours at intervals over a period of 9 days, so, convinced in his own ability, he set off. Just 3 months after learning how to fly, Rogers took off from Sheepshead Bay in Long Island, New York, on September the 17th, 1911. Poised to reach the Pacific Ocean in 30 days. A support train, arranged by his sponsors, followed his flight, carrying all the parts, tools and mechanics necessary for repairs and maintenance. The Vin Fizz crashed on its second takeoff and suffered extensive damage. More incidents, including 2 engine explosions, more than 15 crashes, and as many as 70 rough landings, significantly delayed Rogers. Each time, crew members carefully and expertly rebuilt the plane, and Rogers headed westward with the sun in his eyes. He weathered electrical storms in Oklahoma and reached Kansas City on October the 14th. His sponsors then directed him to take his route to the more populous Southwest, so he turned towards Texas, arriving on October the 17th, 1911. It would eventually take 2 weeks and 29 stops to get across Texas. In addition to his maintenance problems, Rogers lacked navigation tools. He didn't even have a compass, and as a result, he got off track on multiple occasions. It was clear he would not be able to complete the journey in 30 days, but he was determined to finish the trip anyway. As news spread, he became incredibly popular with the American public, as evidenced by the crowd of 20,000 waiting for him in Pasadena, California, when he landed there on November the 5th, 1911. Finally, on December the 10th, he landed in Long Beach and taxied his plane up to the Pacific Ocean, completing the world's first transcontinental flight. The cross-country trip took 49 days to complete, missing the prize deadline by 19 days. While the feat made Rogers an instant national celebrity, his success was sadly short-lived. He was killed in a plane crash after flying into a flock of birds just a few months later at an air show in California. Following his death, Rogers was interred in the Allegheny Cemetery in Pittsburgh. The Vin Fizz itself was later given to the Smithsonian Institution by Galbraith's widow, Mabel Rogers. If Rogers was one of Pittsburgh's first aviating sons, then Helen Ritchie was certainly their first aviating daughter. Born in McKeesport near Pittsburgh on November the 21st, 1909, she was a self-proclaimed tomboy who ran away from home at the age of 12 and joined a circus. Her authoritarian father promptly brought her home, but Ritchie preferred male clothing and wore her hair in a boyish bob long before it was stylish. She shunned dolls, preferring to play with mechanical toys. After graduating high school, Helen enrolled in the Pittsburgh Carnegie Tech for a career in education, but she found it dull, and after a few months she dropped out, still looking for the spark that would light that flame of interest. Ironically, her aviation interest began by accident. Ritchie lived near an airport, and one day she and a friend decided to take a ride to Cleveland just for fun. They flew to Cleveland, perched on some mail sacks inside a Wacko biplane. When Ruth Nichols landed at Cleveland the same day, dressed in her white flying suit, Helen's eyes popped. When she saw the newspapermen, photographers, and autograph seekers gathering around her, Ritchie suddenly knew what she wanted to do with her life. Standing only 5'4" tall, those who saw her fly said she was a natural. Helen enrolled in a flight school and was awarded her pilot's license on the 28th of June 1930. In celebration of her accomplishment, her father bought her an open cockpit biplane. However, a pilot's license was not enough. Helen was smart enough to realize that the future for pilots would be with commercial airlines, so she went on to earn her commercial pilot's license on December the 4th, 1930. Despite this, the thrill of stunt flying lured her away from the airline industry, and Helen became an aerobatic pilot. Having no formal training in this type of flying, she relied on observation and her natural talent. By 1932, her flying skills had earned her nationwide notoriety, especially after she finished third in the Amelia Earhart Trophy race. Because of this popularity, Frances Marsalis, another prominent female aviator, contacted Ritchie, and in 1933 Ritchie was Marsalis's co-pilot when they set a new record for a 10-day endurance flight. To accomplish this feat, the women circled around the city of Miami, with two other pilots flying up to meet them over 83 times to provide fuel, food, water, and repair materials. Without the modern advances that we enjoy now, refueling consisted of one of the two pilots climbing out of a hatch, catching the fuel nozzle as it descended from the other plane, and shoving it into the fuel tank. Not only was this extremely dangerous, but it also presented a very high likelihood that they would get sprayed with gasoline. Helen gained acclaim when on the sixth day the nozzle came loose and, catching on the wing, tore the fabric. In order to ensure they could stay aloft long enough to set the record, Ritchie climbed out onto the wing with needle and thread and repaired the tear. Upon landing, officials declared that they had set a new record for a refueling endurance flight by staying aloft for 237 hours and 42 minutes and flying a total of 23,700 miles. In August 1934, she flew in the first Women's National Air Meet. She finished sixth in the 20-mile race, but her eyes were set on the featured event, a 50-mile race. With only 6 miles to go, Helen Ritchie and Edna Gardner were fighting for the lead when Marsalis came up from behind and tried to overtake them. However, going around a turn, Marsalis's aircraft hit some turbulent slipstream, causing her wingtip to scrape the ground, catapulting the plane end over end until it came to rest in a field. Ritchie went on to win the race, but the news that Marsalis had died from her injuries whilst en route to hospital made it a bitter-sweet victory. Adding to that victory, Helen was awarded the prestigious Fairchild Trophy later that year. After only 4 years of flying, she was at the top of her game and proving herself to be one of the best pilots in the nation, but she had lost her taste for aerobatics. Helen accepted a job with Central Airlines and became the first woman to fly a commercial airliner on a regularly scheduled mail route in December 31st, 1934. Newspapers across the country cited Central Airlines as breaking new ground, and Helen was leading the way for the dawn of women coming of age. What Helen had failed to realize was that Central Airlines was in stiff competition with Pennsylvania Airlines for the best mail routes. So Helen was viewed less as a pilot and more as a publicity goldmine. She spent more time signing autographs and handing out postcards than actually flying. The Civil Aeronautics Authority also recommended that she only fly in fair weather. Sadly, Helen also faced heavy discrimination from the male pilots and was refused admittance into their union. Fed up, she quit after only 10 months and returned to flying privately and in competition. Despite the fact that America was not yet engaged in the war, it had become evident by the late 1930s that their involvement may become necessary. To that end, Ritchie attended an intensive pilot instructor's course and became the first woman not only to earn a pilot instructor's license, but also to be assigned to train military pilots. Her assignments took her to Philadelphia, Boston, and Los Angeles. Completing that assignment, she returned to McKeesport, and after some formal aerobatics training, she began to teach airline pilots how to become instructors. Helen applied for the women's division of the British Air Transport Auxiliary, the ATA. She was immediately accepted, and after 3 weeks training in Canada, Helen sailed for England in March. She was assigned to the White Waltham Aerodrome near Maidenhead in Berkshire. She started her training and took her first flight on April the 11th in a Miles Magister. The ATA girls were charged with ferrying planes from the factories where they were built to RAF airfields all over Britain. By June, in addition to the Magister, she had flown Harvards, Oxfords, Masters, Hurricanes and Albacores. In July, she took up a Spitfire for the first time, but that flight ended in a crash landing. Determined not to let it get the best of her, she went back up in August and flew nothing but Spitfires for the rest of the month. The ATA girls were accustomed to flying many different types at a moment's notice, and as such they all carried ferry pilot's notes, which detailed how to fly each plane and any pertinent quirks or idiosyncrasies. Helen said that sometimes we would hurriedly skim through the pilot's operating manual to find out how to take off, then keep reading the book while in flight to find out how to land the damn thing. These missions were dangerous, not only because of their unfamiliarity with the aircraft, but also because there was always a risk of encountering the enemy. By September, Helen found herself in charge of the 20 American pilots in her unit. In 1943, Helen's mother fell ill and she returned home. However, after her mother's death, she was accepted into the Women's Air Force Service Pilots. The mission of WASP was much the same as the ATA girls, so after a short amount of training in Texas, she was assigned to the 2nd Ferrying Group of the Air Transport Command in Wilmington, Delaware. Here she flew many different missions in a variety of aircraft. In 1944, she was transferred to Kansas City so that she could train on bombers and cargo planes before returning to Delaware. By the time that WASP disbanded in December 1944, Helen had flown 300 hours in 27 different types of aircraft. With the war over, Helen returned to McKeesport to her family. However, aviation jobs were scarce due to the influx of male pilots returning from the war. Despondent, she moved to New York, but having never fully recovered from the death of her friend Marsalis or the recent death of her mother, and believing that her flying career was over, she fell into a deep depression. She felt that there was no place for her to do the job that she loved so much. On January the 7th, 1947, Helen Ritchie took her own life. Her hometown of McKeesport named a park in her honour, but on March the 11th, 2010, her true worth was finally recognised, and Helen Ritchie was posthumously awarded the Congressional Gold Medal.
another amazing installment of Plain Tales.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. I appreciate everyone listening to that so nicely and quietly.
Intently,
It was wonderful.
I think is the word for it. Intently.
No, actually, for people who come from Pittsburgh, they should be rightfully proud of these two wonderful pilots. One of them, very, very early aviator who really set the tone for the adventurism of aviation in the United States. Really, the very first guy to buy an aircraft from the Wright brothers, and then to fly it completely from one coast to the next, to the point of actually taxiing into the ocean when he landed at Long Beach. I think it was absolutely brilliant. What a show. Yeah, well, it was to prove the fact that he'd actually done it from coast to coast. It was a hell of an adventure for him and his backers, but sadly he killed very shortly after. Bird strike incident. So even back in those days when you flew so slow, it was still pretty damn dangerous. And then Helen Ritchie is just a heroine of aviation. Not only one of the very first female airline pilots, but a fine pilot during the war, doing that appallingly difficult job of delivering aircraft from the factories to the squadrons, and often flying types, very different types, from one moment to the next, and really having to do everything on the hoof. Fabulous, and a very sad end to her life too. But no, Pittsburgh has got a great history of fantastic aviators.
That was so full-packed with information, I'm going to have to listen to that again. Once we publish that. Thank you, Nick.
You're welcome.
Okay, our next piece of feedback from Richard.
Just on the Plain Tales note, actually, you've got some really good feedback from the chat room. Nick Lane Street in the chat room says, another eloquent and entertaining Plain Tales. And Tony S says, awesome, Nick, very topical.
Oh, yes, of course.
And Mariana says, lovely tale, Nick.
Oh, isn't she nice? Yes.
Mariana's a lovely lady.
Well, thank you all very much.
Oh, and Tony S has also just said that Steph looks like she's setting off for Antarctica.
Well, I should thank Liz Piper very much for the gloves that she has kindly shared with me up here. So, but I'm really not that cold.
It's a little chilly here, actually.
It's chilly, but I'm making a little more of a show of it than.
To do it outside.
I think it was Carlos's idea, wasn't it, to do it outside? No?
Can I just point out, well, before we came out here, Jeff,
socks and shoes
you
are
guaranteed
not
us that we'd be in blazing hot sunshine and that we had to bring our shorts.
You know that is not true. We talked before, several hours ago, and I said, where are you gonna do the show? I said, I don't know, maybe outside in the courtyard. Yeah. Okay, it's my fault. I decided it was a good place to do it.
The truth comes out.
Yes. Okay. Anybody else want to make any smart comment? I mean, nice comments? No? Okay. Yeah, it is cold outside. Richard, I thought it would be kind of cool to have a live audience, but now I'm thinking I like the other way we do it.
I think regret is a good word.
Yeah, regret is a good
it
word.
Comes to mind.
I just need to take some more of my senior moment mints and I'll be okay. Richard says, hi, AVG crew. I found this article that says German airlines are relaxing the 2 people in the flight deck at all times rule from June 1st. I've worked at my airline as cabin crew for over 9 years, and we've always had the 2 in the flight deck rule. And I was shocked how many airlines didn't have this in place when the German wings accident happened. The article says that the rule did not increase safety but could rather create other risks. For example, due to the door being open for longer to let the crew in and out. This is such rubbish. The process of letting a pilot out and a cabin crew member in takes no longer than a pilot coming out. Okay, maybe a second or 2. But the door is still being opened and closed twice to let the pilot out and then back again. I'm not sure about other airlines, but when a pilot needs the bathroom on my flights, I block the galley with a trolley, have a crew member ready to go while I monitor the passengers. If anyone even looks like they're going to walk to the front of the door open, I quickly close the flight deck door, which has happened a number of times. Why can't passengers see the seatbelt sign? My God, that winds me up. As a passenger, you have pretty much one thing to look at, the seatbelt sign. Why, oh, why, on a 4-hour flight, do you choose to get out of your seat during the 4 minutes it's on? Anyway, that's a rant for a different day. I think that was a rant for today, actually.
Yeah.
But Richard Nash in England is going to rant some more, I think, in a future feedback. I'd love to hear all of your crew's views on this. Have a great week. Forward to the next podcast. Thanks a lot. So, I knew that we have several people that might have an opinion because I've heard it before, and wondering about what you think about the fact that they kind of instituted this rule, and now it looks like they're going, maybe that wasn't a great idea. And now all the U.S. carriers, that rule is not going to change. But the European carriers, it looks like that they're taking a second look at this and thinking perhaps not a wise decision to institute this two persons in the cockpit at all times rule. And we'll start with Captain Nick. I'm sure you have some thoughts about this.
Well, the initial concept, of course, was a little bit of a knee-jerk because they felt that protection was absolutely necessary, and the public were, to a certain extent, demanding it. So it was instigated, I think, without a lot of thought as being the safest option. I think we have to, first of all, look at the rarity of these kind of incidents where a pilot will deliberately lock another pilot out of the flight deck because their mental state is so poor, and we've kind of touched upon this a little bit today. There are, of course, different categories of mental illness. Some of it are severe, some are mild. And obviously in the Germanwings case, it was an extremely severe case, and there were lots of other areas where it would have been possible to have prevented that accident. And really and honestly, the two people in the cockpit rule was not necessarily the best way to have done it. A much better way to have done it would have been to have ensured that the medical condition of the pilot involved was better known to the aviation authorities, because then he could have been treated properly and his condition could have been monitored by the authorities. That the fact that it was hidden by the rules that existed in Germany at the time, I think, are the major cause of the accident. Now, I'm going to put it to you that having two people on the cockpit doesn't necessarily make the cockpit safer, because the person you're inviting onto the cockpit to replace the, say in this case, the captain, say, who's left, might be someone who's only been employed by the company for a few months, may have only had a few weeks of training, and honestly, the security or the checks that are done on a cabin crew member, who inevitably will be the person who comes on the flight deck, won't have been particularly rigorous, certainly compared with pilots. So you're getting someone of an almost unknown background on the flight deck to sit behind the only pilot left. Now, if there was someone amongst the many cabin crew that are on our aircraft who might be of a disposition to do something similar to the Germanwings pilots' actions, that would be much more likely, because one, there are more of them, and two, you know a lot less about them than you would do a pilot. They're now in a position on the flight deck to do exactly what the Germanwings pilot did, except, of course, all they have to do now is to take out the pilot that's left on board, which is a relatively simple thing to do. I won't explain exactly how, but it's not hard at all. Yeah. And then you do exactly the same thing. So I think actually the thought was that, particularly in some airlines where we get very experienced pilots, Acme Red only has pilots with a lot of hours, type ratings, who've been on airlines for a while and their career is well known. We're not one of those airlines where we get a lot of very young pilots. It was much safer perhaps to leave the one pilot on his own. We know what he's like, we know he's good and safe, so better that than introduce an almost unknown party behind him on the flight deck. So I think that was the thought. You don't necessarily make the flight deck safer by bringing another member of the crew in there behind him.
Yeah, we have a question from Micah.
Excellent.
kind of a follow-up along those lines in terms of whether you have two people or not on the flight deck, and I can't remember the exact situation nor the flight number, but weren't there two people, both pilots on board that Egypt Air crash when they came down out of Kennedy? And remember back, and again I don't remember the flight number, but you'll know remember the incident when the FedEx plane was taken down all by crew because a guy brought on the spear gun, and there was a whole crew of pilots on board, and it still happened. So I'm just kind of interested in if you remember those particular incidents and what happened there.
I remember the FedEx one, Micah. It was a flight engineer who, with a mental illness, who thought that he would commit suicide by crashing the aircraft. His actions, he hoped, would be hidden by the incident. So he came on board deadheading with a bag full of tools that he hoped wouldn't be considered to be unusual. And then once he got onto the flight deck in the air, he attacked the pilots with hammers and a spear gun and various other things. But the pilots, although they were quite severely injured, managed to get the aircraft back on the ground. Although, to my knowledge, none of them ever flew again because of their injuries. So that sort of situation didn't change the rules, as I recall. So there's one case where they looked at and said, this is such an unusual incident that there's no reason to change our general rules, which have worked very well. The other one I'm not so sure about, but I do get your point in that I don't think you necessarily need to always change the rules when you get a one-off incident or a very, very rare and very unusual incident. The rules generally work very well.
And the rule changes typically become reactionary, and you should never just react. You should always think them through when changing rules, even passenger policies, et cetera, and so on. Don't just change a rule. Think about whether this was an unusual incident.
Exactly right, because it's much harder to relax the rules afterwards than it is to invent a new one, which doesn't necessarily happen because of a lot of consideration and thought and examination, but generally as a knee-jerk reaction by governments who are looking to pacify the general population.
And I think even if you had, we talked about treating the pilots better in terms of mental health and all of that. I think even if you had a perfect treatment program in place, a perfect program in place where people could be open and share those details and not have fear of prejudice or discrimination for being treated for those things, or fear that they're going to lose their jobs or their medical certificate or their, all of that. I think even in a perfect situation, you're still going to have instances that you cannot account for. So there's nothing out there that is truly a perfect screening program, a perfect treatment program, a perfect, corporate environment, whatever it is that you want to call it, that's going to prevent those things. So, I agree with it from that perspective 100%.
And I have to admit, I'm coming around quite a bit. I thought at first I was surprised that not every airline around the world was doing what we had been doing here in the U.S. for so many years. And my knee-jerk reaction was, well, we're doing it right, and why haven't you been doing it? And now I'm starting to see some of the other arguments from, other parts of the world, and I'm kind of coming around on this. So a lot of good points from both sides of the argument. We have another question from Brian.
So, Captain Nick, you talk about a non-qualified person being on the flight deck, and that's not a good idea. But I'd raise the question, isn't it a good idea because potentially, although they might not be qualified to fly the plane, they might be able to open the door and call for help or have someone else come to assistance if the person flying the plane decided to do something. Isn't that better than not having anyone at all?
Well, no, I think the theory is that the person you bring on the flight deck is more likely to be the person that causes the incident. Brian, the person you bring on might be someone who is, because of the limited background checks on every airline employee, might be actually someone who has a reason to want to crash the aircraft, and he's just waiting for his or her moment to come on the flight deck, when they're asked to relieve the pilot that is going to the toilet. And then once they're on the flight deck, they attack the perfectly sane and normal pilot from behind, which is a relatively easy thing to do if you are on the flight deck and standing behind the pilot, and having then killed them or disabled them, caused the aircraft to crash. So I think that is as big a threat, if not bigger, than just leaving a pilot on the flight deck on his own.
So you guys are really hiring people that I should be scared crapless over, is what you're saying, right? Okay.
Well, you could be as well. So the answer is that either you instigate extremely high-level checks on every single employee, or you just try and limit the threat. And because we obviously get a lot of cabin crew compared with the number of pilots, pilots generally are very well known in the industry. It's a small number of pilots. We all tend to know each other. We all know each other's backgrounds. We've often worked together. They've come from other airlines. They have a history, a well-known employment record, all those things. And that makes pilots a known, generally speaking, a known work group. The guy on German wings was a very new employee straight into the industry from his flying school, and it was obvious from day one that he was a bit of a problem, but the information had been withheld from his employer, and therein lies the problem. Now, we know cabin crew come on to an airline, they perhaps work for a year or two, they move.
It's Captain Al here. I just wanted to introduce another element to the discussion. In airlines that had the two-person on the flight deck rule imposed on them in the aftermath of German wings, they noticed quite a trend change, really, because historically where you could elect to go to the bathroom whenever was appropriate to you, yeah, obviously you wouldn't do it during takeoff and approach and so forth, but you were able to moderate your own fluid consumption so that you went to the bathroom when it was convenient. From CRM perspective, because obviously having to get one of the cabin crew to come onto the flight deck for the pilots to go to the bathroom interrupts the service, and therefore causes a degree of annoyance on behalf of the cabin crew. And sure, they do it because they have to do it, but if they're in the middle of a service, it means that one of them, and quite often airlines will have minimum crew, so there isn't just a spare person kicking around to go onto the flight deck. What happened after a while is that the pilots started to change their behavior with regards to the consumption of water, and then you start to have the medical side effects of that with regards to dehydration, and quite frankly working in a very dehydrating environment and effectively starving yourself of water so that you go to the bathroom less frequently because it's inconvenient is, in the long term, and it's a subject fairly close to me as some guys will know, is going to have detrimental effect on your health. And you know, I'm sure Steph will advocate that we should drink quite a reasonable amount of water because, you know, we need to flush the toxins out. So if you decide, right, well, ordinarily I'll drink, you know, 1 litre, 2 litres of water on this flight, and you end up having no water, then it's not a good idea.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. You know, you definitely want to keep health and safety concerns there, and dehydration is a big one. So
yeah, I mean, I canvassed a few guys when my own airline went back to not having the two-pilot rule, and they said, oh yeah, we drink a lot more water now. It's like, well, yeah, if we'd stuck with this rule for, you know, 5, 10, 15 years, how many pilots' health would have been affected by it? You know, well, we don't know really statistically, but I suspect quite a lot. Whereas the difference for you, Jeff, is that you've always had this rule, so you've not had a change in behaviour. So, you know, where you consume your, you know, fluid, water, whether it be in the form of beer or the conventional variety, you know, hasn't changed. But where you have an enforced change, it has quite a detrimental effect.
Yeah, my one question would be, where does pilot incapacitation come into this versus actual malicious acts?
Yeah, that's another aspect of it. Yeah, so you have the
flight deck prohibits access, then you can get back onto the flight deck. So that's not a problem.
Yeah, it takes
Seriously.
some time, but you know, in most cases, this kind of thing would happen at cruise with the autopilot system fully engaged. So unless there, you know, it was just bad karma where you have a pilot incapacitation and then somehow the auto flight system is deactivated or knocked off.
again, very statistically
Yeah,
low
very,
chance
very,
of occurring
yeah.
situations.
And I'd like to point out that the need to get someone on the flight to replace a pilot leaving is not compulsory. It's up to the crew. If I decide that I want to leave the flight deck for a while and I would like to have a cabin crew member be on the flight deck monitoring my first officer, I'm quite at liberty to insist on that. So it's up to me as the captain whether I decide that it's necessary or not. So if I know my first officer and I completely and implicitly trust him, then generally speaking, I will probably go off on our own. But if I've got a new first officer, a new joiner, and I don't know him, and I am the least bit concerned, I might well invite someone who, from the cabin crew who I know well, to come on and replace me. So it's by no means a hard and fast or a change. It is an option to us, that's all. Those of us that don't employ this rule as a hard and fast rule. So I can still do it if I feel the need, but I don't have to on every time I leave the flight deck.
I'll make this quick. What is the one thing that you think, Nick, I know you're not a terrorism expert or anything like that in terms of security, but you're a pilot. What's the one thing that would help make flying safer from a security perspective?
Well, employing more pilots, so that would be a great assistance. If we always had 3 pilots on the flight deck, or we had 2 pilots and a flight engineer, that would be great. I've never been a great fan of reducing the number of pilots, and I've always felt that it is better to have an extra bod on the flight deck, just even from just a pure monitoring point of view. When there are just 2 of you, then you can, particularly during an emergency situation, get one pilot being doing one job, one pilot do another. They're actually separated. They're not monitoring each other anymore, and it's very nice to have that third pair of hands. So if I had unlimited money, I would ask for aircraft to be built with an extra pilot on the flight deck to be there for assistance. But as it is, we're stuck with a minimum crew of 2, and that's generally speaking always the case for flights, generally up to 8 or even perhaps 9 hours. So that would be the one simplest thing I can come off the top of my head that would improve security.
And one more thing, and this is actually probably more for Jeff than for you, Nick, but or maybe even Craig, because he might be aware of it. He's a pilot here in the USA, but there's a program here that, and I can't remember what it's called, that allows for pilots who go through certain training to carry a sidearm with them in the cockpit. And how does that affect in terms of the screening with that and the dangers that might be involved with that as well? And maybe, and again, it may be something that you may not be allowed or would be inappropriate to comment on, but I'm wondering if that can be discussed some.
It's called the Federal Flight Deck Officer Program, FFDO. Can't really talk a lot about it because many of the details of this program are, kept relatively secret for obvious reasons. But I can just let you know that they are actually federal agents, just like an FBI agent or any federal law enforcement. They are actually law enforcement officers who have legal jurisdiction when they're performing their job in the cockpit, and so they get essentially the same kind of training that any federal law enforcement officer receives, and they're extremely well vetted.
I assume they go through a major security clearance.
Yes, yes, they do. And then they go through some pretty intense training as well, initially. And then they go through recurrent training at certain periods.
No, I'm just curious, Jeff, and don't answer the question if you're not comfortable, but where does the authority lie for that person to use his weapon if he's a first officer? Does it lie with himself as a federal agent or with the commander of the aircraft?
That is a really good question. I think maybe First Officer Craig might have something to say about that.
It's my understanding that, yes, the captain's PIC of the aircraft, but then when it comes to a safety concern, that regard where there's a FFDO on board, that if there's a need for it, then he or she then becomes the person in charge of the situation.
The way I always looked at it is that's the person that has the gun. They're in charge now.
Now, that's a real interesting situation, and I wonder how the general public would feel about knowing that the commander would be playing second fiddle to his first officer in that kind of a situation. I find that that's a most interesting. I haven't really thought much about it, but it would take me quite a bit of mulling over to work out how I was going to play through various scenarios where that might occur.
If somebody's trying to beat down that cockpit door and they actually break into the cockpit, I'll be very happy that if the person that I'm flying with has a weapon and knows how to use it, is trained well, takes care of quelling the situation.
Absolutely.
So,
No,
yeah.
I go along with you there.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the situations where slightly more nuance might be required.
Yeah, no, so, and one of those things that a lot of people misunderstand about the Federal Flight Deck Officer Program, the only time that they're allowed, well, I don't know, I should probably not say anything, but some people think that, well, this is a dangerous thing, they could go back to the back of the airplane and try to handle a situation or quell a situation, and that is not their jurisdiction. You know, their number one priority is protecting the cockpit, and that's the only time that that their weapons would be, and I hope I'm not saying anything I'm not supposed to say, but just to put that out there, that you don't need to worry about like some of these incidents we see recently with people beating up
Like
on
the one
each
in the
other.
terminal,
Exactly.
Fort
They're
Lauderdale.
they're
That's
not going to be
gonna-
pulling their weapon out
Right.
and start firing away. That's well, I mean they could, but they're not supposed to, and they'd be in big trouble if they did. Oh yeah, absolutely. The captain must be informed that the person either if I was a flight deck, a federal flight deck officer, I would have to tell my co-pilot that I am, and he would have to tell me as well. And I'm also responsible for ensuring that the lead flight attendant knows this as well as the gate agent. And there are a lot of policies and procedures that go along with this to make sure that everybody that needs to know, they know.
So the chat room are having quite a massive discussion at the moment in there about what we're discussing here now. There's a question from Mariana in the chat room. She's asking, are pilot applicants given a psychological and psychiatric test as part of the hiring process?
I can't speak for all the airlines, but I know that my airline, that is part of the interview process. I'm assuming it is for all airlines. Craig, is that the case with you don't have to get up if you don't want to. You're keeping Ashley warm over there. By the way, it's very cold here.
Yes. Yes, I just had a normal interview questionnaire sort of thing, so it wasn't any cognitive tests in the regional for that I work for, but I'm sure the face-to-face interview is part of that cognitive, see that you're alive well,
Right.
and can hold a conversation, this, that, and the other. So
Yeah. So how did you make it through that?
just fine as far as I know.
Just kidding. Needed to play my rim shot there. Sorry. So yeah. So I guess it's maybe the purview of the airline whether or not they actually. I mean, for Acme Airlines 28 and a half years ago, they actually had a psychologist that was actually part of the interview where you go in there, and it was so funny because people would really worry about. I guess they had a rocking chair in the room, and so you go in there and people were just perplexed. Okay, when I sit down in the rocking chair, should I rock in the rocking chair or should I like not rock in
What
the rocking chair?
does it say about me if I rock versus if I sit
Yeah, and I'm
still
thinking, just
versus
go-
if I'm a little fidgety?
Just go in
or
there
if
and just
I'm-
be yourself, and whatever happens, happens. Don't worry about it. But people are really. There have been many people that were eliminated from getting hired by my airline because they did not pass the psychological part of it. We took a battery of psychological tests as well. What do they call it?
Psychometric?
The psychometric program. We have something called some kind of a personality.
Myers-Briggs.
MMPI or some Minnesota, whatever.
Multi or mini. Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Thank you, Micah.
That, and in addition to actually talking to a real person, and for me, it was just like talking to anybody here. It was like, oh, so how do you feel about working for Acme? And you understand that part of the culture here is that you stand at the door and say goodbye to the passengers when they're leaving the flight. I mean, that's part of, we've been doing that for years. Do you have a problem with that? You don't say, yeah, I got a problem with that. I'm too lazy to get up and say goodbye to the passengers. Okay, thank you very much. We'll not hear from us again. So, yeah. But as far as in-depth personality, or not personality, but psychological probing and all that kind of stuff, no.
You're not sitting on the couch with the shrink. And
No. You know, I think if there were a foolproof method of doing that, we would all employ it. The industry would employ it. But there is no foolproof method. I mean, it's all a matter of judgment. And even a psychiatrist will tell you that it is impossible to make a diagnosis in the same way that a physician would diagnose a broken leg. You know, it's not a he's got it or he hasn't. It's very much down to a matter of opinion.
It's subjective versus objective.
Well, they let you and Jeff and Al and Craig fly, so the standards are obviously very low.
Yeah, we've all managed to sleep through. That's why we're here on the podcast.
Lane Street in the chat room is asking, how will the pilot shortage affect the screening procedures?
Well, I think screening is screening. Either you make it or you don't. They're not going to drop the standards on essential tests like that. What they might do is reduce the number of hours required, reduce the need for type rating, that sort of thing, to ease the problem. But I seriously don't think that they will ever what's the word I'm looking for? A compromise.
Compromise.
Thank you very much indeed, Liz. On safety standards. That's the important point to get across.
There's a question in the chat room that I thought was interesting, and they asked basically if, there's a U.S. Air Marshal program, and again, this might not be able to be commented on, but do U.S. Air Marshals ever fly on international carriers coming to and from the U.S.?
I really can't comment on that.
No, I think each country has its own form of protection in that ilk. For example, the UK has air marshals, but they're not US air marshals. We have our own special branch police, armed police, who perform that role. So, and I'm pretty sure that, for example, Israel, who have had this sort of a program for a very long time, use their own people. The US Marshal Service would not have jurisdiction over other airlines of other countries.
So a question I had is, and maybe Captain Jeff can answer this, is if a federal air marshal is on board, is a flight deck notified and is a flight crew notified? So you know that someone is on board even if you don't know who that person is.
Right.
So you know on that particular flight.
When the whole system was initiated or instituted, they actually would come on before anybody boarded and get a full briefing and all that kind of stuff. But then they decided, it's probably not a good idea because all of a sudden people are boarding and there are already a couple people sitting in first class and we just started boarding. How is it that they're already on the airplane? It was like kind of obvious, I think. So they decided that it would be better to have our air marshals come on board board with all the passengers, so it's not obvious who these people are. And that's really all I can say about that. But so now, no, we don't receive a full briefing and face-to-face introduction. I know I'm given the information of the fact that we have air marshals on board. I know where they're seated, and the flight attendant in charge also knows. And I always tell the first officer, we both know that that's part of the security there. We have to know that. So, and again, this is kind of one of those areas where I'm not sure exactly how much I'm allowed to talk about it because it is it's an important program and we really can't give away all the information about this. Yes, Barbara. Oh, okay.
Hey, so speaking of people in the cockpit who aren't supposed to be there.
Yeah.
I think there was another recent story about that.
Really?
Yes.
Well, what happened, Steph?
So this was actually, it was Pakistan's, what was the name of the airline? No, I can't find it.
Pakistani Air, I guess?
Something like that.
Okay.
But anyway, the pilot was accused of putting passengers potentially in danger, and this is from the Mirror in the UK. So the headline,
Very trustworthy
the headline is awesome.
newspaper.
It says, Pilot endangers passengers' lives after letting mystery woman into the cockpit for 2 hours during the flight.
So an ordinary woman would be fine, but a mystery woman isn't.
Mystery woman, not okay. Not okay. So anyway, Pakistan is investigating that potential security breach after the captain allowed the young woman to sit in with him until the plane landed. It was a flight from Tokyo to Beijing, and I guess it was caught on camera as well. Yeah. You know, that is a great question. When she went back to her seat, the person who was recording it asked if she enjoyed the landing. And she just looked at him with a confused expression on her face. So,
what
anyway,
do you mean?
That was just a nice little corollary to our discussion that we
I
just
think
had.
we all deserve a huge thanks to whoever just pitched up with an enormous pile of pizza boxes.
Thank you, David Vanderhoof.
David, you are
Awesome.
a hero.
Airplane
Thank you very
geeks
much indeed.
represent.
Exactly right. So now, excuses if we're going to talk with slightly muffled voices while we eat pizza and continue.
Yes, it's the cheese kind of falling down my cheek. You know what? It's really cold. Well, I guess since now everybody has pizza, I was about to just end this thing, but since everybody's eating pizza, we can go on a little bit more. Okay. Everybody cool with that? It's kind of chilly here. It's about 12 degrees Celsius and about 55 degrees Fahrenheit.
Ooh.
A little bit of a breeze. Everybody's bundled up except Carl. He's in shorts. Not sure what that says about Carl, but
actually, Lane Street is trying to warm us all up here.
Is he?
In the chat room, he's just mentioned the Mile High Club.
Uh-huh.
Very much like the FFDO and Air Marshal program. Not a lot we can say about that.
No, but it actually more likely to be 7 Mile High Club.
Very good point. Unless you're flying at a very low cruise altitude.
Very true, yes.
Mile High Plus.
Some of us don't fly that high. So.
Let's see.
Just saying.
Well, here's some audio feedback, and that would allow us to actually get some bites of pizza in. So this is from Jim from Canton, Akron.
Hey, Jeff, this is Jim from Akron, Ohio. Hey, I've been a long-time listener, and almost since you relaunched the podcast, and love the format with the multi-crew with Nick and Dr. Steph and Dana and Rick. I hope you're back on board someday. I just wanted to call to say thanks to Nick for all those plain tales, and especially the ones with his father, Andy Anderson. Those were fantastic, and hats off to you, Nick, for recognizing that's something that needed to be shared with everybody. So wish your father the best for us, and thank him for everything he's done for us. And unfortunately, I can't be at Wings over Pittsburgh because my daughter's graduating from college that weekend, but we'll catch up with you guys someday. Thanks.
Jim. Well, that's much more important. And there's the other Captain Jeff Felmuth, also wishes that he were here.
Yes, and we actually should say congratulations to his son. The reason the other Captain Jeff Felmuth is not here is because his son is graduating from college this weekend. Actually, only about 30 miles down the road, summa cum laude. So,
Summa cum laude.
Congratulations to your
Very
son,
nice.
Captain Jeff.
So obviously, his son gets his great intellect from Jeff's wife. All right. Let's see, what else can we do here? And thank you, Jim, for the nice, kind comments that you made about Nick's father. Nick, what do you think about that?
I think if you hold on half a second. Nick?
Where are you? What happened to Nick?
How would you respond to that, Nick?
Yeah, so what did you think about that audio feedback from Jim?
It was great.
He was giving you, complimenting you and your father and those great interviews that you did with your father and how much he appreciated them.
Yeah, it was great. I really appreciated it. Thank you very much indeed.
All right. Let's see. How about this from Tanya? We're getting some more female APGers, sending in feedback and all that kind of stuff. That's great. That's always good. Tanya says the feedback from Kevin on APG 270 about seeing a strange-looking contrail and wondering if it was perhaps generated by a secret aircraft was quite timely, as I just listened to an episode of the David Feldman Show where he had a comedian, Alonzo Bodden, on who talked about his time building aircraft, the F-117 in particular. When he was actually involved with it, he was not able to reveal any details about it or even its existence. He also mentions how they funded said aircraft without revealing the existence of it. Here is a link to a 3.5-minute clip of the segment. Great stuff. So without permission, I'm going to play a 3.5-minute clip of this podcast. Again, I'm promoting their podcast, and hopefully they'll see the wisdom in that.
What do you mean you built airplanes? Because I know we've talked about this before.
I literally built, the main airplane I worked on was the original stealth fighter. For your listeners, if they want to Google it, just Google F-117.
You built a stealth bomber?
No, not the bomber, the fighter. The fighter was used in
For
the
surveillance,
first Gulf
right?
War. No, it was an attack plane, but it wasn't considered a bomber because it only could carry 2 missiles at a time, or I think they could put 4 smaller ones, 2 big ones or 4 smaller ones. But the big thing about it, it was the first airplane that radar couldn't see. It could fly through a radar area, and you're old enough to remember. Remember a movie called Firefox with Clint Eastwood?
I'm going to pretend that I'm not old enough. Who's Clint Eastwood?
Okay, let me refresh. There was a movie. It came out in the early 80s, and the plot line was that Russia had invented this top-secret airplane that you couldn't see it on radar, and it was silent, and it would project false images of itself, and it had no heat trace, and it was basically an invisible airplane, and the idea was for Clint Eastwood to steal this airplane from the Russians so that the Americans could make the technology, blah, 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 right? Well, when that movie came out, we were actually building a plane that could do all of that, and it was top secret. And we're like, can we tell anyone? Can we tell anyone that we actually know that? Like, we make one of those?
Wow.
And the cool thing, the full circle experience was around 98, 99, I was doing a show in Kuwait, and I was at the base where they kept these planes because they used them, like I said, in the first Iraq-Kuwait war. And when we got there and they're showing us the plane, and I start talking about it, and they're like, hey, wait a minute. How do you know all of this? And I was like, well, kind of knew it before you did, young man.
So you came to work to make a stealth bomber or a stealth fighter. Could you find it every day? I mean, was it easy to spot? I'm sorry. That's a horrible...
No, it's an easy joke. It's an easy joke. It's right there. Yes, we did find it. I will tell you, this is how secret that job was. Okay, again, you're too young to remember this, but your older listeners will remember. Big scandal about the $600 toilet seats and the $1,000 hammers.
Yeah,
and all of that.
I remember that.
What that was, that's how they, and I learned this later, that's how they finance secret projects, right? So you have this, we were in like an assembly line in a building.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yes, it's all sealed up. Like once we went to work, like you went into work and they closed the door and you couldn't leave until the end of the day. It wasn't like you could go in or out or anything like that. So what they did was they had an assembly line of a plane that the government knows about, that people know about, and you do a bunch of overcharges on that one to pay for the secret one that people don't know about. And that's how they finance these projects. Well, that's how they used to finance these projects. Who knows what's going on now? But yeah.
Wow.
So when they talked about a $600 toilet seat, it was like, well, actually it's an $8 toilet seat, and $592 is going to finance the secret military project.
So there you go. That was a little 3.5-minute snippet from David Feldman. Please don't come after me. I really like your show, and that was a great clip from it. And hopefully, people listening to this show will subscribe to yours and grow your audience and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, that was interesting stuff. I had no idea that was the way they funded secret projects, but it makes a lot of sense.
It certainly does, and certainly explains why some of those bits and bobs used to cost so much.
Yeah. Okay, I think you want to wrap it up, you think? Or you want to keep going?
Whatever.
Little
You're the
more?
boss. Whatever.
Oh,
Whatever you think.
What do you reckon, guys? A little more?
A little bit more, or stop it?
One more.
One more
One
feedback.
more.
Okay,
Pick
so-
the best there, Jeff.
Okay, so
we'll wait until it gets dark.
Oh, okay.
Perfect. Sun goes down at
So
what,
I'll let
8?
the let this be an audience decision. We can talk about let's see, wind shear. We can talk about go-arounds. Yeah, you can always go around. What else do we have?
Actually, we haven't had a green story this week, Jeff.
Well, we even if we don't have a green story, we can always play this.
We're going green. We're gonna take care of the earth. We're going green.
Okay. Rebecca sent in some feedback regarding lithium-ion batteries, and all of a sudden this is getting louder. I don't know why. Okay, that's enough of that. Oh, I think I just crashed my soundboard. How about that?
Good job.
It didn't want me to play that anymore. Okay, so lithium-ion batteries from Rebecca, or Steve, the guy that does our How I Got Here installments. He sent in a little promotional feedback. He did a video regarding fuel planning. And so what do you think? Promo him. Okay, let's go. Steve says, "What's the fuel? CRJ diversion fuel planning. A shameless plug of a video I did a week ago on fuel planning. Sort of referenced to the CRJ, but the concept can apply to any airplane. I hope it can help someone making sense of diversion planning." You really need to watch the video of this.
I could have played it out.
Yeah, well, Matt now informs me that he could have played it out, but how is anybody else going to see it? Yeah, I want the audience here, the live audience, to be able to see it. But let me just play a little bit, just give you a little tease of Steve's amazing video regarding fuel planning, and it really is a good video. You need to watch it. The link will be in the show notes, and here's just a little bit, a little taste.
Alrighty, quick little tutorial on alternate diversion fuel planning. So let's say we're flying into Chicago. So here's Michigan and here's Chicago. And here's our hold out along our route. And, well, actually, here's Lake Michigan and Wisconsin, and Chicago's actually over there. But anyway, okay. So flying into Chicago, here's Michigan, here's Lake Michigan, and
Okay, so because you're not seeing the video, you're really missing a lot of this. He has a piece of paper, and he's drawing this stuff, and we're watching him draw this all out. It's kind of funny when he said, okay, no, Chicago's not there, and he scratches it out, and then he just wads up the piece of paper, throws it away, and starts off with another piece of paper. Anyways, again, you really do need to watch the video to get the full impact of this, but I just wanted to play a little snippet of it. And since that was only a little snippet, let's just play one more piece of feedback to get a little bit better or more of a discussion. And I think that, and this discussion that Rebecca sends in regarding lithium-ion batteries may take a little time, because I think a lot of people are going to have some opinions about this, and we could talk about that for a while. So let's see. I don't know what to say.
I forgot what the other one was now already. The go-arounds?
The go-arounds, it looks like...
it's just an article.
That's an article that I don't have downloaded yet, so let's don't do that.
Wind shear feedback? How about that?
Okay, let's see. Hi, I'm Greg, a Coast Guard helicopter pilot, general aviation flyer, and aviation geek, who recently started listening to your awesome show. I probably only have a dozen or so episodes under my belt, but I love them all. I didn't think that I would be interested in a 3-hour podcast, but I guess a lot of people share that. But I guess the power of APG syndrome is just too contagious. You really have assembled a great crew to work with, and they all add a nice touch of class to the show.
I don't know who he's talking about.
I don't know either. I want to personally thank Captain Nick for his plane tales. I can only imagine they take up a significant amount of his time, but they are really appreciated. I really enjoyed your discussion on wind shear during episode 266. I was recently reading IFR magazine, the May 2017 edition, and they had a great article on handling wind shear. and they referenced FAA Circular 00-54 Pilot Wind Shear Guide. The circular was created back in 1988, but it still contains a lot of great information for both private and professional pilots that is still applicable, minus the advent of wind shear detectors in modern aircraft. Had a quick question for all you. When you are lining up for takeoff with thunderstorms approaching, do you ever feel pressured to take off when your spidey sense is tingling that a possible wind shear is approaching, or does your company's standard operating procedures have enough leeway for you to refuse to take off until after the storm passes? I was just curious, given the pressure of on-time arrivals and departures these days. Again, love the show. Please keep up the great work with the rest of the crew. And again, that was from Greg. So thank you, Greg. Coast Guard helicopter pilot, GA pilot, and aviation geek. Good question. You want me to start? Okay. No? Who said that? Okay, out of here. Yes, we are given discretion. In fact, we're given even a little bit more discretion. We used to have some hard and fast rules, like if the thunderstorm cell is within 5 miles of your departure path, then you cannot take off. But they've given us actually a little bit more latitude to analyze the situation, judge whether or not it's a safe thing to do. Because we can do, like, let's say it's at 4 miles, almost right off the end of the runway, you can, almost immediately turn away from it and still provide a safe flight for your passengers. Yeah, you're right about that spidey sense. If you're thinking, you know what, everything kind of seems ominous, the air is unstable, there is definitely the potential for wind shear, I think I'm just going to wait. And we are, at my airline, given full authority. In fact, they expect us to make a decision and to err on the side of safety. And if it means that the flight's going to arrive 15, 20, half an hour late, it doesn't matter. We can wait until the situation becomes better, and then we can take off. And what do they say? Better to arrive
late in this world than early
better
in the
late
next.
in this world than early in the
Yes.
next. Thank you. I should write that down. Okay, that's what I have to say about that. Anybody else?
I just think, the corollary to that is, or the opposite of that is true too. There might be times where 5 miles isn't enough. You want to have more leeway than that. So, you said sometimes it could be 4 miles off the end of the runway and you'd have a safe, clear path around it. But other times that might not be true. So you have to analyze the entire weather picture that you're given. So, I don't think you can have hard and fast rules on that. And I think any airline that mandated that wouldn't be putting themselves in a good position. So.
This is an interesting one because it doesn't just apply to wind shear. It applies to any approach where the conditions are right on your minima. It applies to any approach when you might be operating from a contaminated runway and the landing distance might be dubious, or your takeoff performance might not be easy or particularly safe. And it's terribly hard when you're in a line of aircraft, all of which are continuing and making approaches and landing successfully or taking off successfully, to be the one pilot who goes, I don't think these conditions are safe for my operation, so I'm going to back out of the queue and not depart. That is a really, really tough decision. And any captain who makes it, I take my proverbial hat off to them, because it's so easy to be dragged along by the queue. And it might be, say, an approaching cell that is creeping closer and closer towards your departure path, but eventually somebody's going to have to not get airborne, or you'll fly straight into it. And being that one pilot who goes, oh no, I'm not flying, I'm going to stand and wait for that cell to pass, takes a brave, competent, and experienced captain, because I bet you bottom dollar, everybody behind him will just breathe a sigh of relief knowing that someone has eventually made a decision and not forced their hand to make that decision. So it's never easy, and every captain has to kind of learn that thing on their own. But when you get a pilot who is capable of making that decision and face down everyone else, even the young Joes behind them who thinks he's being overcautious, or his passengers who think he's unnecessarily delaying them, I think is a fine captain, and I think that's the sort of thing we always ought to follow.
Captain Nick, when that happens, if you're in the big conga line at Heathrow and somebody decides they're not going to go and they pull out, does oftentimes, since when one person pulls out, other people, because they're not the first, follow and choose to do that?
Oh, yes. Almost definitely. It's a matter of human nature, and you've got to be aware of the feeling of pressure, and you've got to be a big enough man to step away from that and go, right, I'm analysing my situation. If I was on this airfield on my own with nothing else happening around me, would I want to get airborne right now, or would I sit and wait for 10 minutes? And if your decision is to wait for 10 minutes, then you pull out of the queue. That's
and almost always, when that happens, then everybody else goes, that's probably a good idea. We'll do the same. And then everybody just waits.
Yeah.
I have two examples of people not waiting. One happened when I was a flight engineer in the 727 in Denver, and there was this hailstorm. I mean, it was making an amazing loud noise hitting the fuselage of the aircraft, and we were, I don't know, number 5 for takeoff, and nobody, United, Acme, and other major airlines, nobody was taking off. And then up comes this younger pilot in a Beech 1900. I forgot what airline it was. And they go, yeah, we can go. And the tower goes, are you sure you want to go? I mean, the hail was like, and we're all looking at each other like, what? Are they, like crazy? Yeah, I guess so. So they took off. And then we're still all waiting because it's just raining and hailing and it's just awful weather. And then all of a sudden we see emergency vehicles kind of all, gathering around us and going along the runway. And then we are all monitoring tower frequency and we hear this guy coming in. And obviously they were not having a good day because the hail storm that they flew through took out their windshield, broke the windshield, unpressurized, everything else. Of course, they probably didn't get very high or very far from the airport. And we were all kind of just shaking our heads going, well, that was a really smart idea. The other case is one that happened in Atlanta, and I think it was ValueJet. It may have been AirTran, but I can't remember exactly which airline. But again, it was one of those days where, wind shear warnings were in effect and severe weather was coming through, and all of the Acme and other major airlines were going, nope, that's okay. We'll wait. And then this guy goes, yeah, we can go. We can take the departure. And again, we kind of looked at each other like, are you serious? Mm-hmm. And you look at the radar, it was like solid red to the north. They take off, they turn to the north, and we're thinking, what is wrong with this person? Well, the same kind of thing happened. They got into some hail, took out the windscreen, unpressurized. They landed, and the pilot was hailed as a hero. The passengers were interviewed on television, saying, "Oh, we have the best pilot in the world. He, brought the airplane back, and we almost died, and everything else." And we're all like yelling at the TV, going, "It was him that put you in that dire situation. He almost killed you." And turns out that after he got all the adulation and the hero making, the FAA kind of contacted him and said, "Oh, we'd like to ask you a few questions about your decision to do that." And he had his certificate suspended for I don't know what period of time, but it was a very, very serious thing, and he definitely endangered the lives of many, many people. So
in the chat room, they obviously understand about wind shear and strong winds, and all the chat room are in agreement that the expert on strong winds is Captain Al.
Ba-doom, bam.
They obviously watched the show when you were in the kitchen studio with us.
Yeah, I can imagine it was Tony S. Actually, yeah, I'm probably the world's leading wind generator, so I bring my own source of wind shear. It's an interesting conversation, and it does take quite a lot of strength of character to be the first person to decide that you're not going to take the departure. And Nick, I don't need your hat, but I have done that at Barcelona, and it's amazing how much of a chain reaction it creates when people suddenly go, I'm not going either. But unfortunately, someone does need to make that decision, and usually it is the slightly more experienced guy, because he goes, well, I've got nothing to prove here. And fortunately, there are, experienced guys out there who will potentially prevent someone from doing something that they don't want to do. It's not a lot you can do if someone's going to go and press on and ignore the majority decision or consensus. But I think sometimes you have to just be bold and brave.
Sure, and I think it's it's a fluid and changing situation and environment too with the weather, where it can be fine for one departure, the next departure, the one after that, and then all of a sudden reach a point, and someone has to recognize when it's gotten to that point. So, and if you're just following blindly the person in front of you, what they're doing, yeah.
They made it. We should make it too.
It was fine for them. Well,
Yeah.
It may not be the same conditions that you're taking
That's
off
a
in.
very big safety factor that we have to encounter.
Is it the same thing going in? Like, Captain Al, you had a bad experience recently with Gibraltar, and apparently that happens often there, where you decide, no, I'm not going to go, and then many other people say, no, I'm not going to either?
Some of the airfields that I operate to, including Gibraltar, are, Hong Kong Kai Tak is another one of those sort of airfields. I know that's closed down now. That has its own sort of unique weather profiles. And Steph, in that particular case, you're absolutely right. It's an incredibly fluid situation. The wind changes there are quite significant. And at my own airline, it tends to be only the experienced skippers who get to go down there. We're specially chosen, not necessarily through being ability, but just through experience. Because the decision-making aspects of going to places where that are more challenging are a bit more involved. But Gibraltar, for those people who don't know, is a relatively short runway, very close to a national border, with a huge rock just to the south of it. So any time that the wind isn't blowing straight down the runway, you can end up with some hideous wind effects. It's not uncommon to have a tailwind at each end of the runway. And wind shear kind of comes with the territory. The airport is probably one of the few airports that in their Met observations actually will report turbulence, as in it's a forecast turbulence and at what level and what depth. Oh, and it also has a major highway that goes straight across the runway. So there are a few operating challenges. But yeah, the wind shear aspects, it's not uncommon to have a difference of 50 knots between 1,000 feet and 300 feet. So in 700 feet, you've got a 50-knot shear. So sometimes you've just got to kind of drive your way through it, because at the lower levels the wind's actually relatively stable. It still might be blowing sort of 40 or 50 knots. But yeah, sometimes it is a case of that, the weather gods are not in your favor, and you have to throw the approaches away. And been quite a few occasions where I've had to do, the three forms of wind shear go around. The one where the aeroplane has predicted the wind shear, the one where the aeroplane has detected the wind shear, or the very reliable one of, I don't like the wind shear, so I don't care what the technology is saying, we're out of here. But they're the right decisions. But yeah, Gibraltar is operationally challenging for a multitude of reasons.
Excellent. Excellent discussion, and thank you again, Greg, for sending in your feedback and asking the question about wind shear and discretion of pilots. With that, I think we all warm up, go inside, and I'm talking to the live audience here. I know I'm chilled, cold. So I think that this will be a good time to end the show. So thank you again, everybody, our live audience, for joining us here today. It's been awesome. You've been great. And if you want to learn more about the show, for those of you listening who have downloaded this, please head over to the airlinepilotguide.com website. There you'll find information about the crew, the community, different ways to listen, watch the podcast, the APG store, the coffee fund, all that jazz there and more. At airlinepilotguide.com. We have some social media.
Social media, Twitter is a great place to find us. We're all together at APG Crew. You can interact with us all together there. Find our individual contact information on Twitter pinned to the top of the page. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/airlinepilotguy. And then on Slack. We actually have in-person Slack information today from the man himself.
APG listeners, if you want to join the Slack team, send me a tweet to HI11E1. Say something about APG and Slack, and I'll send you an invitation. On Slack, we discuss the events, like this event and other stuff that's going on. And if you really don't like searching through Twitter for all of our tweets, put it on Slack, and we can find it a lot better.
And I'm going to take your advice. Thank you, Hillel. Let's see. I guess that's about it. We have more APG stuff and airplane geek stuff and plane talking UK stuff tomorrow. If you happen to be in the Pittsburgh area, of course, you won't be hearing the show until after that, so never mind. So we're going to have a great time here this weekend, and looking forward to the air show tomorrow and Sunday. And the best part of all of this, of course, is just being together with the community, this AvGeek community, which is just awesome. Again, thank you to all of our live audience. And I think Barb wants to say one more thing.
Is there a camera?
Oh, she needs a camera too. Wow. Okay. Well, she's really getting into this celebrity.
See that? Thank you, Captain Nick. He gave me a Boeing 747.
Yeah.
Especially for me.
I'd do anything to get rid of a Boeing.
You've always got an answer. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
And apparently Al got a catering van.
Yes, he has. You never know when Al will need an extra snack.
So with that, I guess we should just
feedback from the chat room just before we close up, Jeff. There's been everyone's absolutely loved the live stream you've done this afternoon. Lane Street, Tony S, Ivor McDonald, just scrolling through the list. Mariana as well. They've all said fantastic show, great work, guys. Well done.
Well, again, we couldn't do it without all of you great people out there listening and contributing, and it's just we're all in this together, and that's what makes it great. And so, wishing you clear skies, unlimited tail. Excuse me. I can edit this out. Don't worry.
Talons, Douglas.
Douglas.
That's what I was going to say. That's what tripped me up. I'm not, wishing you clear skies, unlimited visibility, and talons, Douglas.
Take care, y'all.
Goodbye, everyone. It's been a great day. Thanks very much.
Yay. Now let's warm up. Get inside. Thanks again.
Drink more cold beer.
David Vanderhoof for the pizzas.
Oh, yes.
Awesome.
Thank you.
What a great guy.
Awesome. Or whoever else had anything to do with that, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And
all the beer
and drinks and snacks.
Drinks
Thank you,
and
guys.
candies, chocolates, all that kind of
Awesome.
stuff. It's really good. Yeah, I think there's some around here somewhere.
Shh, no one tell Brian.
Brilliant.
All right.
You've been a fantastic audience. Thanks for sticking with us.
All right.
Oh, you can't.
Yeah. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Watching online and watching this after the fact on YouTube. Hope you enjoyed seeing a little bit of the behind the scenes of recording one of these shows, both our show and the PTUK. Make sure you check out their channel. Airline Pilot Guy. Airline Pilot Guy / PTUK. No, wait a minute. That's not right. YouTube.com/PTUK, I guess, right? Is that the way you get to? Plane Talking UK. Okay. Just go to their website, planecast.com.
Actually, you know what, Barbara?
Well done, Jeff. Well done, Ned.
Do you want a hot drink? Can I get you a hot drink, Jeff?
Oh, no, I'm fine.
You sure?
Yeah.